9:50 and 12.
Smashed any? If you found any?
The people smash the smash.
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, where more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another two grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, "I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source." Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer's on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work.
It's crap. It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy world.
We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell in for Julie Hartley-Brewer this bank holiday Monday. She's back tomorrow. Fear not. Lots to discuss, including the man firebombed for putting up a flag of his own country, of the England flag. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about 7 in 10 people saying Keir Starmer is handling migration badly. Also, Angela Rayner defending buying an £800,000 seafront home. Fascinating story in the front page of the Daily Express today as well. A smuggler, small boats crisis is Labour's fault. That's certainly what you think as well. 70% of the public have told YouGov that. That's in the Times today. But interestingly, with this story in the Express about the smuggler saying small boats crisis is Labour's fault, what have the Home Office said? What have they said? The paper is providing a platform for this alleged people smuggler to promote his vile trade. The Express should do the right thing and pass on all his details to law enforcement agencies. Well, they're not going to do that because they protect their sources. This is free speech in our country, a freedom of the press, incredibly important. We need to hear from even vile and horrible people who are smuggling people across the channel, because otherwise we won't know the scale of the problem or what's actually happening. And there is the Home Office once more trying to clamp down on our free speech and freedom of expression. We'll talk about all of that. We'll talk about what you want to talk about as well. 0344 499 1000. One story that's absolutely terrified me was Irish medical consultants demanding that the state not give sick children Israeli medicine. Yes, really. This is 2025. This is a number of consultants, senior people within the Irish Health Service. I'm sure there are people in the health service here in the NHS here saying the same thing. We'll look into that story. We'll also look into the story about whether people should be fined £1,000 for playing rubbish music on public transport. Maybe it should be the death penalty. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get your point across this morning. As always, on every show I do, I will take as many calls, texts, tweets and voice notes as as I can. You can send me your voice note or give me a ring on that main number, 0344 499 1000. You can text me, 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, James Healy is the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator and joins me now. James, it's great to talk to you this morning. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Peter.
I think Keir Starmer on his second holiday of the summer, this one apparently not being interrupted. Well, we'll see how the week goes on. He's abroad, apparently, somewhere in Europe. James, he is not having a good time, especially with what's been reported on the front of the Times this morning about 7 in 10 people saying he's handling migration badly. We've had a huge raft of different policies over the last kind of 2 or 3 weeks, really over the summer, including when Yvette Cooper was interrailing with Ed Balls, which to me sounds like a sort of Alan Partridge series. Tell me what your thought is on Keir Starmer and how he's handling this.
So I think it's been a pretty bad summer for Keir Starmer, and that's reflected in Labour's party polling, which is now down to less than 21%, the lowest since they've got into office. The entire political economy of Reform UK, elements of the right, is very much stressing that immigration is the single biggest issue right now. That is increasingly what the public is saying as well in terms of public salience. It's the number one issue. And of course, the more and more you talk about the boats, illegal people arriving here, the inability to deport them, all that plays into Reform's hands at the expense of Labour, which would much prefer to talk about things like the NHS, public services and all the money they're spending on that. So increasingly Labour are losing control of the conversation, and I think after a summer in which small boat arrivals have hit record levels, we're on course for the biggest year since this crisis began in 2018, it's no surprise that I think this has been a pretty bad summer for Labour. And as we go into party conference, no wonder there's talk once again of a number 10 reset and government reshuffle to go with that too.
Another number 10 reset, James. What could that actually look like? Are we into reshuffle territory just yet? I'd heard rumours of maybe the junior ranks. We still don't have a homelessness minister, for example, because the homelessness minister, Rushanara Ali, resigned after a scandal about her jacking up the price of her own home that she had owned, a property that she had owned. She got people out and then jacked up the price. Not illegal, but hardly within the spirit of things when you're the homelessness minister. We still don't have a minister there in Angela Rayner's department. She's under pressure because of her own homes as well. Reshuffle, and tell us what you think about Angela Rayner too.
Sure. So on the first point about reshuffle, I think you're right to identify it'll probably be the lower rungs of government. What they want to do is get some of those talented 2024 intake into government, taking them up from the kind of PPS role and giving them an important but low-profile role in key departments such as the economy, public services, etc., rather than doing a big cabinet reshuffle where you might see 2 or 3 changes. But really, it's about kind of improving the lower level of the talent. You've got to remember, of course, Peter, that thanks to the Corbyn years, Labour had very few MPs who, as one MP put it to me, weren't mad, bad or sad. And as a result, they had to kind of stuff the lower ranks with just who was around, who was available. Now they've got this huge majority.
Including Torsten Bell, who is the Treasury Minister and policy wonk, who said that he absolutely couldn't live on £70 a week. He doesn't seem to be connected too much to reality. Tell us as well about Nigel Farage, who says he would prioritise British citizens over foreigners. He had a big interview in the Times on Saturday. Lots of people thinking his plan to deport people 5 flights a day could actually be something that the public could sink their teeth into. He's got another press conference tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be going to that press conference tomorrow. And really, this is a culmination of many months of work by him and Sir Yusuf over the summer. Essentially, it's going to be their plan to rip up existing conventions and replace our membership of the ECHR with a British Bill of Rights instead. It's going to be lots of controversial. It's going to be highly discussed. But I think from different people I've spoken to over the weekend, those in the Conservative Party, those in Reform, think that this is very much in the right ballpark. More details need to be worked out. It needs operational funding, etc. But I think it's going to be a really big statement of intent and one they can build on in the future.
Sia Yusuf has told The Times it will have nothing in it to help activist judges to stop flights taking off. It will prioritise the rights of British citizens over foreign ones. We are not going to flinch. We are not going to be intimidated. We are not going to deliver. We are going to deliver, of course, for the British people. Yes, I think they probably want to deliver for the British people. It's the only way to restore this country, to stop the invasion from happening. And under the plans, the UK is going to formally withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights and other international agreements. Human Rights Act, which enshrines the convention in British law, would be replaced by a British Bill of Rights, which would only apply to British citizens and those who had a legal right to live in the UK. You'd be quite narked if you were the Conservatives, wouldn't you? Because they've been considering all this, putting up a few test balloons about it, but not actually doing it.
Yeah, and we can expect Kevin Badenoch to back withdrawal from the ECHR at Conservative Party conference in about 5 weeks' time. But of course, once again, Nigel Farage and the nimbleness of Reform UK and their ability to outstrip her because they frankly don't need much of a party internal democracy, have once again beat her to the punch. And so I think this is a perfect example for what Reform and people like Zia Youssef say, which is that the Tories are just quite, because they're so big, because they're so cumbersome, because they encompass so many viewpoints, there's a danger that actually they can't get that kind of critical mass behind supporting these measures, which we need to do in order to stop the small votes crisis in this country.
Yeah, and that is a very, very big issue. Farage says the Bill of Rights would include the freedom to do everything unless there's a law that says you can't. He says the opposite to that is the concept of human rights, which are state-given. James, just as a journalist, I am really concerned about what the Home Office has said. Its furious reaction to the Daily Express today. They've got a big and very interesting interview, I'm sure you've read it, about the smuggler who says the small boats crisis is Labour's fault. This is an Albanian people smuggler claiming the government could stop small boats from crossing the Channel tomorrow if it truly wanted to. The gang member described the wave of protests at hotels housing migrants as laughable. He says Labour isn't stopping the boats because it needs a cheap workforce. These are all things that, look, this is a deeply unpleasant human being who, you know, I don't want him to receive a penny from migrants, but nonetheless, he's spoken to the paper on condition of anonymity. The Home Office says that the paper is providing a platform for this alleged people smuggler to promote his vile trade, urged the Express to do the right thing and pass on all his details onto our law enforcement agencies. I mean, your own paper has just won a famous victory in regard to certain people telling you to do certain things that you don't want to do. Press freedom is under pressure in this country, as is freedom of speech. We're the home of free speech, and I want to make sure that, look, it's a horrible thing, he's a horrible man, but it's interesting and important to read what he's saying and for there to be a freedom of the press in this country. James, are you as concerned as I am?
Yeah, very much so. It was Churchill who said that criticism is like pain in the body. It alerts one to a state of deteriorating affairs. And actually, what we're doing here when the press reports on these things is not necessarily to advocate one side or another. It's merely to alert the public to something that is going badly wrong. And I think it was really striking comments by this Albanian people smuggler. And actually, Labour, it would seem from those comments, is going after the messenger rather than the message.
Absolutely.
Overall. And that's what's so telling, is that they're not trying to kind of actually address this or rebut the argument. It's more going after the person and urging him to shop their source to the authorities. Yeah,
which they're not going to do. They're not going to give up their source. It's an interesting one as well, James, because we've seen over the weekend many of these protests, up to 30 of them, have been in all sorts of different parts of England and actually Scotland and Wales as well. I just want to play a clip now. This is of a man attempting to put up an England flag. I will warn people, it is a bit grisly, so just be advised, there is blood on his face at one point. A firebomb is thrown in his direction. Let's have a look at this clip.
Move the car, bro. Putting flags up, got petrol bomb. Let's go. Just finished the night, 3 hours of flagging, and our boy has just been petrol bombed. Petrol bomb thrown at the car, smashed straight onto his head. Patriots putting the other Patriots together, we've just been attacked with a petrol bomb. Police are here.
So that is in Stevenage. That is someone putting up an England flag who claims they had a petrol bomb thrown at them. James, things are, I mean, Nigel Farage as well, talking about him the other day, said things are pretty close to the edge in this country. I really hope they're not. I really hope he's wrong. I really hope that, you know, a lot of these protests happened over the weekend. There have been something like 15 arrests, which is regrettable, but nonetheless a small number in regard to the many thousands of people who took part in them. What's your assessment of how things are in this country, James?
I think they're pretty bad. I think that after a generation where we've not had a living standards increase since 2008, at a time when the government's authority seems to be slipping away in the face of a succession of crises and flails around like a giant leviathan, I do think things are pretty bad. That said, I would caution those who at times seem to be almost salivating at the prospect of a civil war. I think there are certain elements of the American right to overestimate this country's slide into kind of state of civil disobedience, etc. We have shown as a country we're remarkably endurable when it comes to things like protecting civil liberties and avoiding street violence. That said, clearly incidents like this are very troubling, and Number 10 will be thinking about this constantly. They're very scarred from talking to people in government, the events of last summer, and I think they need to obviously work out the best way to try and stop these communal tensions and try and ensure that our great tradition of peaceful liberty and peaceful coexistence remains in the face of increasingly stark challenges.
Tell us what's coming up, James, in the next little while, what we can look out for, because we're coming to the end of the summer. This is the bank holiday at the end of August, of course. You've mentioned the different conferences there, because Reform UK's conference is going to be coming up first, then the other parties. Just talk us through the autumn, 2 weeks of Parliament as well. What can we expect to chat about?
Of course. So on foreign affairs, we're going to see a number of ministers making trips to China. I think that will raise the issue about sort of UK-Chinese cooperation, different issues such as the new embassy in Tower Hamlets. Then we're going to have Reform's party conference season. A week after that, we've got the Liberal Democrats down in Bournemouth, followed by Labour up in Liverpool, and then the Conservatives rounded off in Manchester. And what we're going to see at different points is, I think, questions about leadership for Keir Starmer and Kerry Badenoch. And then, of course, we're going to see different ways in which Reform and the Lib Dems, who are really the two big winners this locals this year, increasingly eating into their vote. All that ahead of a lot of speculation in the budget we're expecting at the end of October, beginning of November. So I think the questions will once again be all about reform and immigration, and second of all about the budget and the British state of the economy.
What do you think about what James is saying? 0344 499 1000. Give me a ring. Let me know what you are thinking. How well do you think Keir Starmer is dealing with migration? You can text me as well, 87222 with the word talk in your text. Send me a voice note as well on that main number, 0344 499 1000. James, you talked a bit about questions of leadership there. I just wonder how serious those questions are, because the Tories are not really going to get rid of another leader, even though she's clearly a bit of a dud.
Well, I mean, I think that they increasingly look at where the polling is, and you think where Rishi Sunak left the party on 25% in November, it's now currently on 16%. And I think the constant debate and constant calculation talking to Tory MPs is whether things will get worse. And actually, if you talk to pollsters, they'll say that if you would get rid of another leader, you would lose a chunk of that remaining vote who are either loyal to Kemi personally or thinking this is a joke of a party. But there's others thinking, well, actually, how much of the furniture are we going to save? I think the key thing is going to be next May, how much the responsibility for what looks like to be a crushing defeat in Scotland and Wales goes on Kemi Badenoch. Personally, I would say not much. But of course, there's that thing about elections. They always crystallise things and trigger things in terms of party movements, much like we saw against Boris Johnson in 22, Theresa May in 2019. There's nothing like standing around talking to devastated local councillors in your local sports hall to clarify things in the minds of Tory MPs.
And Starmer, there's no serious attempt on his leadership. I mean, clearly his leadership isn't working. 70% of people saying that his leadership on migration, which is the most important issue in the country, according to pollsters, as well, according to what people are telling pollsters, there's no serious threat to his leadership, is there?
I don't think right now. I think that increasingly the whispers will grow louder if things are as bad as this or worse in a year's time. But what I mean by that is that it was a very unhappy party conference last October. Everyone grumbling. You think they'd have lost the election, It was a real start.
I was there. Yeah, I remember all of that grumbling. I remember there was no sense of, oh gosh, after 14 years, Labour are finally in power. Isn't this amazing?
Yeah, precisely. And that's why I think that this reshuffle will be really interesting whether that happens before or after conference. I suspect beforehand. But last time it was obviously that conference really pulled the trigger, I think, which led to Sue Gray being forced out after less than 100 days. So something like that, something as significant as that could potentially happen, because I think Labour MPs are saying, look, things are not working. And look, we're on course to lose Wales for the first time in more than a century. The Welsh Labour Party has not lost a general or Senate election since the days of Lloyd George. Potentially that's what's going to happen next year. And of course in Scotland as well, the SNP somehow were on course to win another term, despite all the crises and scandals that have beguiled them the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, thank you for your analysis there. That's James Heal there, who is the Deputy Political Editor at The Spectator magazine. What do you think of what James was saying there? Let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. It'd be great to chat to you on the phone. There's so much around this morning as well. There's also this story, which I'm fascinated what you think about, which is the Conservatives saying that they would fine people up to £1,000 for playing out bad music, or just music in general, on public transport. I've been on public transport quite a number of times, and people just don't use headphones. It's one of those things that just is so minor, but it's nonetheless a really, really irritating thing. And Peter Blexley, actually, who's our crime commentator here at Talk, he often posts pictures on his social media of people putting their feet on the seats. It's just these little things that don't actually amount to a huge amount, but actually are just, I think, an indication nonetheless of our society and how our society is feeling, and how people aren't just playing by the rules and respecting one another as well. What do you think of it? Should people be fined £1,000? How would you like to be fined £1,000 for playing your music on public transport? I saw a great interaction on social media recently from a journalist who said that he'd gone up to someone and said, "Can you please put headphones in?" And the guy said, "Well, why? What's the problem?" He said, "Well, it's just a bit obnoxious and antisocial." And the guy who was playing the music said, "Okay, fair enough." And the journalist said, "Well, okay, this is great. This is marvellous." George in Corby's been in touch and says, "I've heard that 7 out of 10 people think that Labour are not handling the immigration problem correctly." That's absolutely right, George. That's based on polling in the Times today and by YouGov. What I want to know is, who are these 3 out of 10 that think he's handling things correctly, says George. Well, it's not even 3 out of 10. It's some who don't know and some who have different opinions on things, but certainly the number is even fewer than 3 out of 10 who think that immigration is being handled correctly. What do you think? Are you in the 7 out of 10 or the 3 out of 10? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
When you look at the system, in one way it boils down to 2 very simple metrics. You've got to reduce the number of people who are coming in to apply for asylum. The inflow has got to be lessened, and the outflow of people being processed and, when they are refused, being returned to their country or another safe country has got to be increased.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Tad in Cambridge, who has texted in to say, "Morning, Peter. By virtue of the fact that Starmer has been utterly useless in stopping unfettered immigration by whatever route, we may deduce Starmer actually wants it to happen and boils it down to wanton gerrymandering. He needs the immigrant vote to make up for the shortfall in the traditional Labour supporters who are leaving the party in their droves. Starmer is cynical and duplicitous in the extreme. He cares not for the good of the country, just what keeps him in office," says Tad. Angela says, thank you, Peter, for highlighting the firebomb towards the flag people. There was also a firebomb at a restaurant this weekend. The violence in the UK is getting more vicious by the day. It's worrying times. Also, Zarina says the comments made by the Albanian people smuggler are flawed. Cheap workforce that are working illegally, not paying their dues, and worse, still creating junkies. I can't see the logic in that assessment. Margaret in Birmingham, why are Starmer and Yvette Cooper on holiday? The country is in crisis, it's falling apart, and both away. He is out of his depth and should resign. He does not like politics, so hand back the keys to number 10. Put this country first. Margaret, I agree with you. I don't think the Prime Minister should be on holiday at this time. I do want my politicians to be rested. I want them to sleep properly. I want them to take breaks. I want them to take holidays. But the fact is, there is a crisis in this country, and the Prime Minister is, in my view, ignoring it. Let's hear a voice note from Sally, who has been in touch.
Morning, Peter. I totally understand the migrant hotel protests, but I think we have to be careful what we wish for. I'm very concerned about the occupants being distributed into HMOs in smaller communities, and there'd be little or no possibility of there being sufficient numbers of residents to demonstrate against this. I do wonder whether the hotel owners and landlords could potentially face charges of harbouring people who have come here illegally, or, indeed, as we're hearing today, housing foreign criminals. The situation's only going to get worse until we find a way to deport or relocate high numbers of migrants offshore. I'm increasingly frightened about what's happening to our country.
Sally, thank you for your voice note. You can send your voice note and I'll play out as many of them as I can between now and 1 o'clock. You just do it as you would send a usual voice note to someone else, but send it to 0344 499 1000. Right, I want to talk about the Notting Hill Carnival now. It's in West London, of course. Most of our viewers and listeners live outside London. 82% live outside London, and we want to be really clear that we're not a London-centric station. We're not the London-centric media. We don't go on and on and on about train delays and, you know, Bishopsgate. But the Notting Hill Carnival is a national thing. About 1 million people go to it every year, and police have arrested 140 revellers there yesterday, and that is a lot higher than what happened last year. There are always stabbings as well. There are always people who get stabbed. There are 2 people who lost their life last year, who were murdered last year. The figures are up 40% on last year. The Met says it's cracking down. It says one of its officers was attacked and she sustained injuries to her hand, which required hospital treatment. 4 of the arrests made on Sunday were for sexual offences, 21 for possession of an offensive weapon, 19 for intent to supply Class A drugs. Another 4 arrests were for public order offences, 25 for possession of cannabis, 6 for possession of Class A drugs, and some 105 arrests took place at the carnival itself. 35 were made on approach to the event. They've had some knife arches as well. Lots of people go and have a lovely time, but it is nonetheless very dangerous. I personally would not go. Susan Hall is an Assembly member and leader of the Conservative group for the London Assembly for the Conservatives. Susan, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of this and the number of arrests?
Oh, hello, Peter. Well, this is the family day that we saw yesterday with all those arrests.
I wouldn't be bringing my family.
No, neither would I. I would persuade anybody I knew not to go. I mean, last year we saw the death of that poor girl trying to protect her daughter on the family day. Thank God there weren't any stabbings like that yesterday, but 15 assaults on police. Every year we get police officers hurt. I just don't think it's sustainable, but I've said this before and been called racist for saying it, but I think we should be sure.
You're not racist, Susan. What you've done is you've identified an event which is not safe. It is factually not safe because there are people who die every year. And if I knew there was an event that I was going to go to that was going to involve people dying, I would not be going to it. Like, lots of people go, lots of people have a good time, you know, cultural expression, that's fine. If you want to have it, my view would be have it somewhere else and have it somewhere that's safe. And I do worry about political correctness in regard to this. I do worry that if there was a large event that didn't involve this community, that there would be other people saying, move it to Hyde Park. There are some people saying move it to Hyde Park or somewhere else in London. What do you think would be a reasonable way to deal with this problem?
Well, I've written a report that was launched a few weeks ago with various suggestions as to what should happen. I mean, the group of people, Notting Hill Carnival Limited, they so often get it wrong, and the police have to step in where stewards should be working. I mean, the ones I really feel sorry for here are the police. They don't get to go because they want to go. They get to go because they have to. Leave is cancelled. They scramble around looking for as many officers as they can. There'll be 7,000 officers there again today. So we can imagine about the policing and the rest of the London area, if you like. And you've started all this by saying that you're not London-centric. No, talk never has been. But there are 2 million people that go over the weekend. So lots of people come in from outside London. I just think that if you've got an event that every year there's massive trouble, then you should be looking at it again. I mean, you read it out. There were 21 offensive weapons found. Well, there were 21 that were found. How many have not been found?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they don't all take. People take knives and goodness knows what there. I mean, before the carnival, the police did lots of raids and confiscated lots of firearms because they know the various gangs in and around London all meet at Notting Hill Carnival. And that is not going to be a happy ending, is it?
So what did your report say? What was your suggestion in terms, just for people who perhaps haven't seen it or haven't seen you broadcasting about it, Susan, what did you say that should happen?
Well, some suggestions, that's all, because it's not for me to say, but suggestions, perhaps the GLA should take over running it as opposed to this group.
That's the Greater London Authority. That's the body you're part of as an Assembly member. And Sadiq Khan, of course, is the Mayor of London. We'll talk about his role in a second, but sorry, continue what you're saying. Apologies to interrupt you.
No, I apologise. Yes, the Greater London Authority, only because they're used to dealing with this sort of event. They do the fireworks every year. Ticketing it, that way you'd be able to control who came in and went out. Also, if you look at the cost of this, Peter, over the next 5 years, we estimate it will cost between 80 and 100 million pounds. That's over the 5 years. We can't afford it, quite frankly. It's all very well, but we're losing 3,300 officers and staff from the Metropolitan Police because apparently there is no money for them. Well, we cannot afford, therefore, to spend all this money over the next 5 years, in my view, on a carnival. So ticket it, possibly move it. You know, I think there are about 10 various things that could be done. It's not for me to say it should happen, but these are things that they should be looking at, because I think the only time they'll do something about it is if, God forbid, there's a mass crushing event, which is what the Commissioner has said he's concerned about.
And actually the Police Federation as well, the union of police officers, has talked about the fact that there may well be 7,000 police officers there, but at the same time often they can't see one another, they can't communicate properly because there is such a crush of people. There are many people who aren't arrested who are openly smoking cannabis, for example, which is still illegal in this country for the meantime, despite what Sir Sadiq would want to happen. And we're in a situation where those people just won't be lifted today. There are lots of areas and lots of things that happen at the Notting Hill Carnival and in other parts of London as well that the police just won't intervene because there is too much of a crush in Notting Hill.
Well, that's right. I spoke to one female police officer who said that in last year she was walking along with a colleague. They saw some, and it was far worse than cannabis, about 3 people along from them. They couldn't get to it.
Yeah.
For the simple reason there were so many people packed in and around them. And this is what the Commissioner is saying is his greatest fear. It isn't necessarily the knives or the guns. It's the fact that it could be a Hillsborough-type crushing event because there's so many people there and they just all move around. We've all been in crowds that move, but when it's so heavily populated.
Yeah, and you don't feel you're in control when you're in. I've been in those crowds sometimes at football matches, and you don't feel you're in control. You've got to move with the crowd, and if it moves in a certain way, you know, you can be pushed. I've been pushed a few times, but thankfully nothing sort of sinister or anything like that. But there are a lot of people who just don't have the autonomy there, and the police as well aren't in control of this event.
Well, they can't be. When you've got a situation like that and a moving crowd, 2 million people go to this over the weekend. When you've got a moving crowd in very, very narrow roads where there's nowhere where they can spill out to, this is why he's so concerned, and this is why we should all be concerned about it. I hope that my fears are not realised because it could be very bad, and I hope it's not.
OK, thank you, Susan. That's Susan Hall there. She's an Assembly member in the London Assembly and leader of the Conservative group there. Serena says, I cannot believe that Notting Hill Carnival is still going ahead because you're literally risking your life. Glastonbury has worked for many years and it's only getting better, says Serena. Maybe the organisers could take a leaf out of their book. Well, things seem to be safe at Glastonbury. One thing I'm very unhappy about is the fact that Pascal Robinson Foster, who's the singer, I use the term loosely, in Bob Vylan, still hasn't been lifted, arrested, or, as far as we know, questioned in regard to his ridiculous, awful, hateful, anti-Semitic views that he had on stage. We'll be talking actually about Israel in a minute or two because Jake Wallace-Simons is going to talk to us about Irish medical consultants demanding that the state not give sick children Israeli medicine. Now, in fairness to them, they're saying the medicine should come from elsewhere, but they want to boycott a major company which has a major manufacturing plant in Ireland because it's an Israeli company. Yes, really, the levels of hatred towards Israel are out of control. We'll take your calls, texts and tweets in just a second as well, so feel free to use the break to lift the phone 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Jason in the Lake District. He runs a hotel and he says, welcome to the No Such Thing as a Day Off Club. A busy day for us, full checkout and many arrivals at our hotel. Cardi P making it more palatable. Well, thank you, Jason, to you, and a thank you for listening. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi, Cardi P. Who is going to enforce the £1,000 noise pollution fines on public transport? They couldn't even make people pay for travelling on public transport. The only ones that will get the fine are the ones that dutifully stop and give their true names and the ones that have the means to pay. Annoying though it is, why not starting something more useful like a phone theft on the streets or shoplifting? Another person, Joe in Belfast, says, not even music on public transport, Peter. I've been waiting on the hospital to see a doctor and people have not only been playing music but also watching films. When asked to turn it down, I'm given abuse. The staff are afraid to intervene. We have a voice note as well from Caroline in London talking about migration and Rachel Reeves. Let's hear from Caroline.
We are definitely at a tipping point with this illegal migration. It's really out of control, as you've been saying and everyone's been saying. But what we're not also talking about is what Rachel Reeves is going to do in her budget. If she brings in this 0.5% property tax on properties over 500,000, millions and millions and millions of people aren't going to be able to pay that. And no one's talking about the tax we're paying. The tax we're paying is literally going to fund illegal immigration, hotels, the civil service, the train drivers. The British taxpayer are getting nothing. That's the revolution we need.
Caroline, thank you for your thoughts. Jacqueline in Liverpool says the things in this country are that bad. I would never have dreamed that one day councils and MPs in England would want our flag taken down, that people are petrol bombed while hoisting the flag. It's both disgraceful and terrifying. I know you will add not all Muslims, blah blah, Peter, but you're being dishonest if you say that this did not happen until the last 5 years with a huge influx of the intolerant religion of Islam, says Jacqueline. Let's speak to Lee in Hull, who has been in touch about the Notting Hill Carnival. Lee, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I went to the Notting Hill Carnival in the late 1980s. Okay?
Okay, yeah.
I drove there with 3 of my friends. So there was 4 girls in that car.
Yeah.
And we had a fantastic time. It was absolutely amazing. Brilliant dancing and all the,
and that's part of it, Lee. You know, a lot of people go and have a really good time and go back year after year, but the problem is that it's just not a safe event. And I don't know. I mean, would you go now, Lee?
No, definitely not. No. We actually slept in a back street in the car.
Right.
And that was when you were able to drive into London and down Notting Hill.
Yeah.
So that was, it's a completely different country now. It's totally different now. You wouldn't be able to do that. Absolutely not.
Okay.
We took water with us. We took everything with us. And we had a fantastic day. And then I drove back the next morning. But it was all about dancing and music and
some of it still is, but I don't know about you, Lee, but if I knew there was an event where there would be people where that level of law breaking would happen, where people would almost, I mean, thankfully it doesn't seem to have happened so far this year, but last year 8 people were stabbed and 2 people died. It just wouldn't, to me, be something that I would say, right, I'm going to bring my kids or my mother or whatever too. It just doesn't strike me as something where I would voluntarily go.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I wouldn't voluntarily go now either, and I wouldn't take my kids or anybody, to be quite frankly, or anybody else's kids, and I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, no, it's completely out of, it's not what it used to be. The Notting Hill Carnival was a brilliant place to be. It was an absolute fantastic event, and it's gone now. And it's not what it used to be. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I did when I went.
You did it when you did, yeah. Okay, Lee, listen, thanks for your thoughts there. That's Lee in Hull. Robert's been in touch and says, never mind music on trains, how about used earbuds and nail clippings on tables in the first class of Thameslink? My last journey made me rich, and yes, there was someone with feet on the seat playing music, in inverted commas, through a speaker. Train travel is not for the faint-hearted, says Robert. Well, Elliot in Bushy has some thoughts on that as well. Elliot, what are your musings on public transport and people playing their music on them, or perhaps cutting their nails? Ugh.
Yeah, well, thank you, Peter, if you can hear me.
I can.
2 experiences, please, very important. I was on the train the other day, local underground line, two really unpleasant individuals got on. They looked filthy. They had their music blaring. They actually laid across the seat, so their filthy shoes were everywhere. I wanted to say something. I'll be frank, I didn't, because I felt intimidated by how they looked, and maybe they'd knife me. That's how unsafe I feel now in London. There were other people in the carriage who were clearly distressed and didn't like it, and I spoke to them, and they said exactly the same. They were frightened to do anything. Fortuitously, these revolting individuals got off 3 or 4 stops down the line. But the point I'm making is what you're saying, and this is so important. I must stress it. The whole ambience of the country, the way we behave, our whole raison d'etre, the way we speak to one another, our style, the English courtesy, that's all gone. I don't know how and why it's gone. Maybe it's because of the immigration. I don't know. But the truth is, nobody cares. I mean, if I wanted to report to someone on the station, there's no one on the station.
Well, your call. I'm sure if you rang them, your call would be very important to them, and they keep you waiting for 45 minutes, Elliot. I mean, the thing is that I'm not one of those people who says, you know, everything was perfect in the old days or anything like that, but there just aren't any staff on trains anymore. There are on the long haul on the longer ones, you know, if you're going up to Edinburgh or something like that, you often have, you know, the trolley person is the only person you're going to see, or you might see the ticket inspector once, but I mean, it's not as if you can just say, excuse me, could you talk to that person? Because they have the authority to say, turn your music down, take your feet off the seats. There are loads of train journeys that I go on. I don't have a car. And there are loads of train journeys that I go on where I see that kind of stuff all the time. Elliot, I asked one person to turn his music down. And I just think, you know, if you can afford 200, 300 quid for a phone, you can afford $5.99 for a pair of headphones, or even a bit more for some wireless headphones. I mean, just put them in. Just don't eat. It's little things. It's, you know, people eating McDonald's on you know, people bring pizzas to a train journey or something like that. It's like, well, by all means eat some food. I'm not saying you've got to go, you know, 3 or 4 hours without having food, but just don't have smelly food because it affects other people. It's this idea that it's all about the individual. It's all about you. It's all about everything you want. It's not about actually being reasonable to other people, Elliot, and that concerns me.
Peter, the other thing just now that's happened, which comes back again to your point of behaviour and who's responsible and the whole way what's happened to the culture of the country. Where I live, it's very nice. I've been walking out on a Sunday, on a bank holiday. It's very warm. There's a couple of bins in the street near a shopping parade. There's filth all over the street. So the bins have clearly they're overflowing, but someone has fly-tipped everything. It's so disgusting. It's so revolting.
That's grim.
So I went into the shop, which was a small cafe shop. I said, how can you have this? Don't you want to complain or do something? Well, apart from it being bank holiday, they said to me, and here's the point, they said, oh, it's always like this here.
Yeah.
I said, well, I've never seen it before.
Yeah.
I live near here. I said, have you reported it? Oh, yes, we have, to the council. No one's interested. You can't get through to the council. And when you do, this is what their words, not mine. No one understands what we're saying. No one speaks English. And you can't get a hold of anyone anyway. We're fed up with it. And that's actually now impinging on their own business.
Yeah.
The film, it is axiomatic, Peter, of what has happened to this country. The authorities who are responsible, they don't care. The local authorities, the governments, people are suffering and people are fed up because they can't get any response. We can complain. I'm complaining. I've tried to ring my local council about it. No one answers. And when they do, Peter, they put me through to the wrong number. And then I get put through to another number and I'm cut off. And when I finally get through to someone, of course I'll be called racist now, the person doesn't speak decent English.
Elliot, I think it is perfectly reasonable for you to expect someone in your local council to which you pay council taxes to speak the language of the country. I don't think that's a racist point. I don't think that's an unreasonable point. I think if you ring someone and say, there is a problem in your local community, can you please sort it out? Especially for that local business. I mean, I was speaking to a couple of business people over the weekend. My show's 10 to 1 on Saturdays and Sundays. I was chatting to someone there who was and actually another businessman as well, who was saying they're not small things, they're big things, but in the scheme of things, they're small things. The councils, the local authorities to which we're paying more and more and more of our taxes, and inflation's going up, so our money's worth less, they're just not responding. They're not helping us. They're not, and then the government comes in and does national insurance on employee national insurance and puts it up. I spoke to a businessman in Scotland. He's been in business for 25 years, and he says that he had 27 employees. He's now had to let 7 people go because he can't afford to employ them anymore. He has 20 people now, and his national insurance bill for employer contributions is the same now as it was before Rachel Reeves put it up. So it's all those things. It's everything together. How are we going to get the growth? How are we going to get our country better? How are we going to get money in if things like what you're talking about aren't just sorted out, Elliot?
Well, my view is, I'm so sorry. I'm 70 years old. I was brought up born in West London. I've lived abroad. I've come back. I'm a Londoner through and through, and I'm sorry to say that this country now is beyond redemption. It's a terrible thing to say. I said to my wife, where will we go? I'm not safe on the streets. It's filthy. No one speaks the language. There's hate everywhere. People are unpleasant. Nothing works. I mean, nothing works. There's no police. There's no deterrent. I heard on your news just recently about this chap. Oh, it was on the Mike Graham show, that he's been holidaying around Europe, and now he's here, and he's staying in some place. And apparently, they think he's been involved in some sexual adventure with some young girl. I mean, you couldn't make it up for a rotten Hollywood B movie. The country is completely ruined, and the reason, in my humble opinion, Peter, is because the government, this particular government, but the previous lot, they don't care. They don't care about the values, our culture. How can we give all these people places to stay free with my taxes and your taxes when there are armed forces personnel who have come back to fought with at wars on behalf of our country, whether you agree or not, that's another matter, who are homeless?
Yeah.
In Windsor, a royal borough, he was homeless. I said, what's the matter? This was 3 or 4 years ago. And he said, I said, well, you know, what's up? Well, I used to fly. I was come out from Afghanistan. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So they hate this country, and I'm sorry to say, they hate you and me because we're British, and we're probably, here I go again. I'll sound.
Well, listen, there's so much that's wrong. There's so much that's wrong, and Elliot, you've identified it really, really well. It's the little things, it's the big things, it's everything to so many people. Elliot, thanks for your call. Great call. I hear you. I hope that others will hear you too. Great use of the word axiomatic as well. It's a great word that's underused. Elliot in Bushy there, thank you very much for your thoughts. We're going to talk about something that's happening across the Irish Sea, but I would imagine is happening or will happen here soon. This is Irish medical consultants demanding the state not give sick children Israeli medicine. Yes, really. This is what is happening in 2025. Stay with us here on Talk.
And the outflow of people being processed and when they are refused being returned to their country or another safe country has got to be increased.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I want to talk now about a story in Ireland, but believe me, it will have implications here, and I would be very surprised if it's not happening here already. But there's a coordinated letter from 50 consultants at Children's Health Ireland. They've called on the Irish state to stop using medicines manufactured by an Israeli company, whereas they put it viable alternatives are available. There's an Israeli multinational company, a pharmaceutical company called Teva Pharmaceuticals, one of the world's largest manufacturers of drugs that treat people. The company makes things like Sudocrem, for example. It's got a big presence in Ireland. It's one of the largest suppliers to their health service. And they said the boycott of its medicine could impose a risk of health and well-being to patients. That's what Teva says, the company. The doctor's letter says, we respectfully request that Children's Health Ireland take immediate steps to discontinue the procurement and use of pharmaceuticals manufactured by Teva while viable alternatives exist. Well, Jake Wallace-Simons is here. Jake, what's behind this, do you think?
Well, I think that it's a word that begins with an anti and ends with a Semitism, frankly. It's a bit of a no-brainer to see that any medical professionals calling upon their hospitals to stop using medicine, which benefits their patients for ideological reasons, have got to be animated by something other than common sense, other than human decency. And look, if they're seeking to expunge all of Israeli products from the health service, that's a big job. Israel invented the stent, for example, which is a life-saving heart operation, a bit of equipment.
Yeah, my dad has stents. They helped him. He had a heart attack. He had stents put in. I'm sure many of our viewers and listeners have the same thing. I mean, exactly. There are huge contributions. It's also this bizarre thought that if you buy something from a specific country, that, I mean, they've said taxes paid by Teva to the Israeli government directly funds the diplomatic and military resources employed by the Israeli government to carry out a genocide, factually not a genocide, and silence dissent domestically and internationally. I don't know about you, Jake, but I've heard quite a lot of dissent domestically and internationally. I also don't think that simply because you buy a British product that you necessarily agree with every single thing that Keir Starmer says and does.
No, and there's also some cognitive dissonance here, which is their belief that the very same country that's producing world-leading medication that saves thousands of lives, and in actual fact, recently has just invented the spinal cord transplant, which could allow people to walk again who were previously crippled. That same country is also engaged in genocide, which hasn't worked because there are still 2.1 million Gazans left alive. The two things just obviously don't match up. It's the same as the idea that Israel is trying to starve the Gazans at the same time as placing many, many millions of dollars into feeding them via humanitarian aid. Those two things don't match, and yet people believe this stuff. Why? Because they've suspended their common sense in the favour of anti-Semitism. It's as simple as that.
The consultants say that continuing to buy medicines undermines our commitment to ethical and humanitarian principles. It says the consultants do not advocate for any measure that would compromise clinical care. They're calling on the therapeutically equivalent alternatives if they are available. I mean, this is just the latest thing, isn't it? But it's often the boycotting, the boycotting and divestment campaigns that have happened previously. Are you surprised that this has happened in somewhere like Ireland?
Well, no, Ireland is a strong competitor for the ignominious title of the most anti-Semitic country in Europe. I mean, during the war, as you know better than me, I don't mean to insult Ireland, but it looked at the Allies and looked at the Nazis and wasn't quite sure which side it should be supporting.
It factually chose. It was neutral, but factually, the President of Ireland signed the condolence book when Hitler died. So they kept their lights on in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, so the German planes could get to Belfast.
Well,
so they could navigate to Belfast. I know that's all ancient history, but the fact is...
Well, it's not ancient history, is it? I mean, the current events are showing that we're talking about now are showing that it's not ancient history at all. And both Simon Harris, the Foreign Minister of Ireland, and the President, Michael Higgins, have both been described as anti-Semitic by the Israelis, because Michael Higgins made a false accusation that Israel wanted to settle Gaza. What? And Simon Harris made an accusation about Israel starving children in December 2024. So it's all, that's Ireland for you. And if they're going to be trying to extend this boycott beyond medical components into other areas of life, they're going to have to stop using their phones, because Apple phones, Samsung phones, Google phones all use Israeli technology. They're going to have to stop using their computers. Apple computers, Microsoft, Google, Intel are all Israeli or use Israeli components. The USB drive was invented by Israel. Camera phones were invented by Israel. Drones, cherry tomatoes, Waze. It goes on and on. They're going to have to start living in their prehistory in order to stop using Israeli products. Good luck to them.
Jake, thank you for your analysis. Jake Wallace-Simons there is the author of Israelophobia. It's Simon Harris, I should say. It's changed a lot. There have been a lot of chopping and changing in recent years, but Simon Harris is the Prime Minister, the Taoiseach in Ireland. So that's just a very small error that Jake made, but very good analysis from him. Thank you to Jake Wallace-Simons. Jane says if the Tories wanted to leave the ECHR, they would have they would be in power, but the Liberal Democrat element would never allow it. The Tories are toast already, says Jane. Patty in Coulston says, morning Peter, lovely to see you again. Thank you, Patty. Thanks for your message. Regarding the government's response to the newspaper article revealing the immigrant trafficker saying Labour doesn't want to stop the boats, your like-minded competitor channel exposed some traffickers and did send the details to the Home Office, who of course did not respond, did nothing about it. It is true, Starmer does not want to stop the invasion. Jane says the reshuffle should be a change of government. The past year has been a total disaster. I also don't believe Starmer has done a good job on the world stage either. And Stephen Millings in Belfast says 7 out of 10 think Starmer is handling migration badly. That's a shocking statistic. Who are the 3 out of 10 that think he's doing well? Well, Stephen, it's not even that. Let me see if I can find the Times here. It's there are a few people who don't know, so it's not even 3 out of 10 who say that he has necessarily done a good job. I will try and get the exact numbers for you and get them for you after the break. I'll look into that. But this is Reform calling for two-tier rights that prioritise British citizens, says the Times, like the summer of '76, while Labour is risking a repeat of the IMF bailout. We'll talk about that as well as time goes on, because economically we're in a serious state. The budget, of course, is coming up in a few months' time. Paul Richards will be with us in just a second. He's a former Labour special advisor. We'll talk about these protests. We'll talk about Angela Rayner and her seafront home, £800,000. She's entitled to buy that if she wants to, of course, but she's cracked down on people with second homes. I am not someone with a second home. I can barely afford the first one. But nonetheless, we're in a situation where there's an awful lot to debate in regard to that. Let me know your thoughts on all of it. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
My message to people smugglers is this. I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Smash the gangs. Smash the people smuggling gangs.
People schmiggling puns.
He couldn't even smash an avocado for a piece of toast.
Or the people... What would that... The people...
I think smashing the gangs is a deterrent. Well, it might be if you smashed any, if you found any.
The people smash... The smash...
And he hasn't smashed anything. I mean, literally all he does is he smashes records every sort of couple of weeks, when more and more people come in a period of 24 hours.
Smash the gangs that are running this vile trade.
You're never going to smash the gangs. That's something that basically is impossible. The gangs are like the Hydra. You cut the head off and another 2 grow.
So I did write to ministers and say that I wasn't convinced that smashing the gangs was the right sort of way of thinking about things.
We will smash the gangs that undermine our security.
Keir Starmer has just tweeted 15 minutes ago. He says, I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source. Maybe I'll just read it all in his accent, shall I?
There is no return to freedom of movement. We have left the EU. I do not accept that prevents us working with other police units here, with prosecutors here, to smash the gangs.
Well, I'm sure the smuggling gangs are absolutely quaking in their boots now. Keir Starmer's on their case. Solving this issue, smashing the gangs, is that the impossible dream, Tom?
It really seems beyond him at the minute, I have to say.
We're going to get the evil people smugglers and we're going to smash them and we're going to put them in jail. That will solve the migrant crisis. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's promise to smash the gangs has resulted in just 5 convictions. Hurrah for operating small boats.
So what he really wants to say is that this policy of smashing the gangs is a total and utter disaster. There isn't a cat in hell's chance that it's going to work. You just can't say it.
It's crap. That's what he's basically saying.
I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Mark my words, I will take back control of our borders. That means cutting migration, ending the use of asylum hotels and ramping up our efforts to stop small boat crossings.
It's like a parallel universe, the real world, as told by the impressive David Bolt, and Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves' fantasy world.
We will smash the people smuggling gangs at source.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well,
Well, a very good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company here on Talk. I'm in for Julia Hartley-Brewer today. Don't worry, she's back tomorrow. Lots to discuss, including 7 in 10 people saying Keir Starmer is handling migration badly. What do you think? Also, Angela Rayner has defended buying an £800,000 seafront home. What do you make of that? Nigel Farage says he wants to prioritise British citizens over foreigners when it comes to bills of rights. We'll talk all about that. We'll also talk about whether we're heading for an International Monetary Fund bailout, the Trump tariffs as well, 25% on things like shampoo, washing machines, the Notting Hill Carnival. We know there have been at least 140 arrests there as well. We'll talk about Gen Z employees as well, young adults increasingly looking for traditional office jobs. They've become unhappy while working from home. Guess what? Working from home can work for some people, doesn't work for everybody. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. We'll also talk about the man who was firebombed for putting up an England flag, the flag of his own country. We'll watch that footage as well. It's not great footage. He's got quite a lot of blood on his face, so we'll be advised about that. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note. We've had some of those this morning. We'll play more between now and 1 o'clock. Send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us. Well, Paul Richards is with me. He's a former Labour Special Advisor. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. I just want to start with this pretty damning poll in the Times saying that 7 out of 10 people say Keir Starmer is handling migration badly. Pressure grows for Prime Minister to get a grip on asylum claims. 7 in 10 voters say Starmer has mishandled crisis. Colleagues apparently want him to take radical action. What do you make of this?
Well, I'm not surprised by the opinion poll because we know that this is the top issue in people's minds. And, you know, anyone that knocks on doors or certainly the MPs who are going out doing surgeries and talking to their constituents know full well what an absolutely live, toxic issue this is in our body politic. So, you know, this poll, I think, just reflects that reality.
It reflects the reality, but do you think Starmer's doing a good job? I mean, we've had over the last sort of 10 days, 3 weeks, I suppose, that we've had so many different policies coming out from Labour, from the government. I'm not sure the one saying that if you put an ad on TikTok for a small boat, you'll be sentenced to 5 years in prison. I'd be very, very surprised how many people will be sentenced to that. I would wonder as well whether, you know, this actually amounts to smashing the gangs. They say 52 gangs have been smashed, especially when you have a smuggler in the Daily Express today saying the small boats crisis is Labour's fault. He's saying that the government could stop small boats from crossing the channel tomorrow if it truly wanted to. Has the government got a grip, Paul?
Well, I don't take gospel the words of an Albanian gang leader, and I suggest you don't either. What they say or don't say, I don't think has much veracity to it. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Peter, by saying that the government is trying lots of different things. And the reason for that is very simple, is that there isn't a single simple solution to this. No government has managed to tackle this of any stripe, because there isn't one thing you can do. And lots of armchair generals come up with their kind of single idea, or put gunboats in the channel or whatever it might be. But we know that there's not a single thing. You have to do lots of things. You have to tackle the gangs in the ways you've described there. You have to do the one in and out policy. The French have to do far more. I think we can look at the regulations and laws around refugee status, and David Blunkett suggested that in the papers over the weekend.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
But there's many things you can do, but there isn't one. You can't just round everyone up and put them in a big camp and send them to the Ascension Islands. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what Nigel Farage says he would do if he's Prime Minister, and quite a number of our viewers and listeners think it's a good idea. I wonder, Paul, in regard to what you just mentioned there, in regard to this change and the fact that David Blunkett and others, actually other Labour grandees, have said that this is something that perhaps withdrawal or derogation, as it's called, ignoring bits of it, of the European Convention on Human Rights is the way forward. Farage has said he'd withdraw from it. The Tories are thinking about it. Surely this is the next big political debate.
I mean, just on Ascension Island, there are 17 RAF personnel on Ascension Island and a population of about 800. How on earth are they going to cope with thousands and thousands of people?
You put more RAF staff on there.
I mean, what a load.
There are lots of British overseas territories. It's not just the Ascension Islands.
Well, and then doing deals with the Ayatollahs and with the Taliban. This is other brilliant idea. So anyway, we will park that. But
the Germans did. The Germans did a deal with Afghanistan to send people back. If the Germans can do it, why can't the British?
I don't think we should be dealing with the Taliban personally. But
well,
I think
Germans have. I'm just saying. You're saying it's impossible. The Germans have done it.
I think it's balmy to suggest it. But on Blunkett, I mean, he and I grew up in a Labour government where what matters is what works was our mantra. And that's why he's suggesting this, as you say, this derogation, sort of ignoring, suspending parts of it while we fix the problem. And I think there's a lot of good ideas there. I think, he's a very practical, David Blunkett's a very practical politician, and he's got his finger on the pulse. And he is a former Home Secretary, of course, as well, served in cabinet. So I think that's the kind of thing that actually the Labour government should be listening to and considering and debating, because we can't go on like this. And I think there is a strong sense coming up through the Parliamentary Labour Party and through constituencies that we have to get a grip on it. It is now the number one issue and dominating our conversation above things like the National Health Service, so it does have to be gripped with. But this is a pragmatic government, and I think they'll look at anything that would work, including a dramatic step like this, just to get it done, because we do not want these crossings. We do not want people drowning in the channel, and we don't want these gangs profiting from this absolutely vile trade.
I'm really interested you say this is a pragmatic government. Pragmatic would suggest that they are leading. Do you honestly think they're leading, or are they just reacting to events, Paul?
Well, I think it's a public policy issue, isn't it? We didn't have the sort of numbers that we had now. The sort of numbers we have now, we didn't have 10 years ago. So, politicians have to react to the reality and to the problems they confront. But that's true for every government in every generation. So I don't think it's reactive, but I do think it does need to get a grip, which is what the point that Blunkett and others are making. And I think when we get back into the parliamentary session in September and we start to, get back into government, I think that actually this would be something that would be top of the government's agenda. I mean, the suggestion that somehow they don't care or that they're not doing, it's sort of not important to ministers. I can tell you it is absolutely the most important issue that people are looking at right now because of the scale of the problem and because of the public disquiet around it.
It may well be important, but what a lot of our viewers and listeners see is a radical plan, a bold plan, maybe one that you don't think will work, from people like Nigel Farage, and not bold action from, I mean, how many people are honestly going to say, do you know what, I think changing the appeals mechanism for asylum seekers who are denied asylum and then appeal, well, it was a judicial panel, now it's going to be an independent panel of experts. That's really going to solve the problem. Like, this is legalistic tinkering by Starmer, and that's fine, that's his approach, but it's not going to solve the problem, is it?
Well, not by itself, but actually, if you can reduce the wait times down from, a year in some cases, then that will definitely speed things up and get the asylum system working faster. And actually, that method of doing it through a tribunal is what the Labour government did before. So we've done it before, and it does work. But you're right, it's not the single thing that will do it. It'll be a multiplicity of different things, and that's one of them. But that is a good approach. And if you can speed that up, it means you can close the hotels, which means you don't have these flashpoints in people's towns that they don't like. And it reduces some of the tensions there.
But Paul, on the hotels, we're in this kind of weird state where a court says close the Bell Hotel in Epping. Keir Starmer says he wants to close all the hotels by 2029, and the Labour government is actually attempting to appeal that and attempting to say, right, we can't do it now because we don't have somewhere to send these people. But if you're going to start closing hotels in the next 4 years, you need to start having a plan. There's no real sense of having a plan. There's also the fact that in that legal argument, the Labour government has said that if the Bell Hotel is closed, this could lead to widespread violence in the country. That is what the legal argument has said. So if they won't close one hotel, how on earth are they going to close 200 over the next 4 years? This is a kind of baffling scenario that we're in.
Well, I mean, there is the commitment there to close the hotels, and these are the hotels that are open.
But they're resisting closing one of them, Paul.
They were opened on the Conservatives' watch, you will remember, but it hasn't worked as a policy, and it has created these flashpoints. But I think it has to be done in a ordered way, and I think it needs to be done in sequence. And if you're going to do it over 4 years, it has to be done properly. And I know it looks bad. I know people are angry and saying, what the heck is going on when you're saying one thing, but it looks like you're doing something else. But it has to be done in a proper, organised way, because that's how governments have to work. But by the end of that 4 years...
They also have to abide by the rule of law. Look, they're appealing this, and that's within the law, and that's fine. I'm not saying they don't have a right to do that. But if they're essentially being told now, halfway through 2025, right, here is one hotel we want you to close, and they're resisting that, and they're saying it could lead to widespread violence, that doesn't bode very well for closing 200 hotels by 2029, does it, Paul?
Well, I can tell you the commitment to close those hotels is 100%, and ministers are absolutely on this.
Why won't they close one of them then? Why won't they close one of them?
Well, because it has to be done within, the parameters of government acting and doing it in a proper sequence so that it makes sense, so that it can actually happen. It's not about gimmicks and headlines. It's about doing the policy correctly so that these hotels are shut. And by the way, I would go after the people who've made profits from this too. I mean, some of them, are driving around in very expensive cars now, these hoteliers, because they're profiteering off this misery. And I think that's
what way would you go after them, Paul? If the government goes to them and says, we're going to give you money to put people in your hotel, in what way would you go after those people?
Well, I'm against profiteering, and I think that perhaps some of that money should come back to the taxpayer.
In what way?
Well, we should take the money back from them that they've had.
Hold on. You have a commercial...
Hoteliers.
I'm talking about
private hoteliers.
Paul, that is nonsense.
Money.
That is nonsense. You have a contract. You have a contract with the hotel, and you say, as a government, we're going to put people in the hotel and we're going to pay you money in order to do so. And then you say to the hoteliers, we're going to take the money back.
Well, I think a lot of people would support that, yeah.
How on earth are you going to do... Okay, you may well support it. How are you going to do it legally?
Well, you can change the law retrospectively and say, well, actually, we're now going to levy.
You've provided a commercial service
as a hotelier.
Right, you've provided a commercial service. We've paid you that money. We've had a contract with you, which has happened, probably signed under the Conservatives, but these contracts are being signed all the time under this government as well. I know a hotelier who was offered one in the last few months, and you're saying that take money back from those people. I mean, that's illegal, Paul.
Well, you can make it legal, and I don't think people should be profiting from these hotels. And I think a lot of people would agree with that.
I think a lot of Labour people would agree.
I'm astonished, actually, Peter. I'm astonished you're supporting them.
I'm not supporting them. I'm not supporting them. I'm supporting the rule of law. If you make a commercial transaction with someone, if you sign a contract to do it, I don't think people should be profiteering from it. But if you sign a contract and you say there'll be a commercial,
aren't they?
Well, of course they are. But if you can make
let's go after them. Then.
Let's go after these people and take the money back, Paul. That's not going to happen. That's pie in the sky nonsense.
Disagree. I don't think people should be making these vast profits from these hotels, and I think it was a really flawed policy in the first place that Mr. Jenrick introduced and then defended and lauded on telly.
The Labour government have
the Labour government is closing them down.
Well, no, but they're not. They're not, Paul. They're not closing them down. They've been told to close one of them down, and they've said no. They have said, you may say they're 100% committed to closing hotels down. There are 200 of them, more than 200. They've said the judges have said, here is one we want to close. Loads of people in the local area say they want to close it. The council has made a legal argument in regard to planning legislation. They've said just close one, not even 1%, 0.5% of the hotels, and the government has gone to court to stop that happening. In the next 3.5 years, they are not going to close the next 200 hotels. That is not going to happen, and you know that, Paul.
I disagree completely. I think they will be closed, and some of them already have closed. I mean, the ones in my town have gone, for example. They didn't cause any trouble when they were open, but they've closed. The hoteliers have done up the hotel very nicely with all the profits. But I think they are closing, and they will continue to be closed until there are no hotels left, because it's a flawed policy. It creates these flashpoints.
Where are they going to go? Where are these people going to go, Paul?
Well, they're going to be dispersed into the community, so they're not in sort of hanging around in big gangs, which people find very intimidating. And I think that's the right approach. And then we will speed up the process.
Would you be happy for asylum seekers to move in beside you, Paul? Would you be happy for asylum seekers?
Like I said, there are asylum seekers living in my town, but we all rubbed along perfectly.
Are they living in your street? Are they living beside you?
Well, I wouldn't mind if I lived next door to somebody who is waiting for an appeal. If it was being dealt with quickly and there was a proper judicial system and process, a legal process that meant that it was being dealt with quickly. If they had the right to be here, they could get a work permit and start working and paying taxes. If they didn't have a right to be here, they'd be gone. The problem is these long waits. They wouldn't be gone though.
They wouldn't be gone though. They wouldn't be gone though, Paul, because there are only 4,500 asylums, people who've applied for asylum, who've been denied asylum, who've been sent back since Labour came to the government. There are far more of those people who haven't been sent back. They're lost in this process, or else they disappear. They haven't been sent back. This nonsense that the Labour put out time and time again, they talk about 30,000 people being sent back. If someone is an Australian who comes here and has overstayed their visa, and they send them a nice email and say, by the way, you've overstayed your visa by a couple of months, off you go home, that Australian says, I'm terribly sorry, I'll book the flight tomorrow, and off they go. That is not a forced repatriation.
But that's an argument for what Labour is suggesting, which is to speed up the process and get these tribunals in place so it can be done much faster. And secondly, it's an argument for what the government is doing, which is to crack down on those employers who are taking people into the black economy and using asylum seekers as cheap labour, which is illegal and shouldn't happen. So there's two things there the government is doing. But I'll return to my opening theme, Peter, which is if there was one single simple thing you could do, any government would do it, because no government wants this issue, dominating the public discourse, and nor do they want this terrible trade in bodies across the sea. We just don't want it to happen.
But at the same time, Paul,
wave a wand, you would.
But at the same time, Paul, there is a difference in attitude, is there not? Because there is a strong view within the Labour Party, within people from a Labour background, not all of them, but some of them, well, I would say the majority of people, that they say we've got to be a compassionate country, we can't listen to people they would term racist, we can't listen to these protests, for example. They're resisting things like closing the Bell Hotel, which a court said should happen. And the fact is that many people will see this a scattergun approach from the Labour government when there are other ways that could happen. I'm not saying the Rwanda approach would necessarily have worked, but it was one idea that are much more radical than this government has done or will do.
No, I disagree. I mean, I do think we have a duty as a democracy to help people who are genuine refugees, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that. We need a fair, robust system, and I would separate that out from migration generally, where you have immigration into the country, which is often in support of our economy, and that's a good thing. So Irish nurses and Filipino nurses in the National Health Service, for example, or French bankers or anybody else, and that's a separate issue altogether. But I don't think that this is a government that's being soft on illegal migration, and I certainly don't think it's a scattergun approach. I think it's a multi-pronged approach, because that's the only way we're going to legitimately tackle it. All else are just gimmicks and froth and headlines. But you need actual action on it.
Well, the action has been taken by Australia, the action has been taken in America, the action has been taken in Germany, far more and Italy as well, far more radical approaches than we're doing. And the fact is the government just doesn't have the stomach for this fight.
I disagree. I think, as I said before, this is the thing that is dominating ministerial attention, and it's something that's top of the government's agenda because A, it's the right thing to do, but B, there is this huge amount of public disquiet reflected in the Times poll, the YouGov poll that's reported on this morning.
Okay.
And anyone that talks to anyone, in a constituency or knocking on a door in a council by-election, this is coming up on the doorstep. So it's a real live issue for ministers, and they are going to tackle it, Peter.
Okay, Paul, thank you. That is Paul Richards there, who's a former Labour Special Advisor. Just to talk about those numbers, Stephen Millings was in touch from Belfast and asked me about the 7 out of 10 people think Keir Starmer is dealing with this badly. He said, what about the 3 out of 10 who think he's dealing with it well? That wasn't quite right, actually, because it was a perfectly reasonable assumption by Stephen. I'm not criticising him for a second, but 18% of people said they didn't know. So 70% of people say bad, 18% of people don't know, and 11% of people think that Keir Starmer is doing the right thing. I know that we've still got 0.1%. I'm not sure what's going on with that 0.1%, but we do know that it's not 3 in 10 people, it's 11% of people, so 1.1% of people in 10 who think that Keir Starmer is doing a good job. I quite like to meet them. I would quite like to meet those people. Anyway, we will hear a lot more on this, your reaction to Paul Richards. Paul in Suffolk says, who's this joker Paul Richards? He wants to change a law and sue hoteliers who they have made a contract. This is ridiculous. The entire problem with our country today. Betty says, typical Labour clown, steal the money back from private enterprise, you paid to clean up your own mess. They all need to be arrested and tried for treason. And Terry says, why didn't you correct Paul Richards, who stated no government has managed to stop illegal migrants? Australia was successful, and Donald Trump. I did mention that towards the end there, Terry, after your message came in, it should be said. And John says, asked if I believe the word of an Albanian gang leader. That's what Paul Richards asked. If I have the choice between the word of an if I have the choice to believe the word of an Albanian gang leader or Keir Starmer, I think I would go with the Albanian. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. We'll take your reaction to that in just a minute here on Talk.
London's police force is completely and utterly wrapped up in dealing with that. So it's a great weekend to be a burglar because you know there's no police anywhere near South London, for example. You don't have to worry about that. If you want to go anywhere near and rob anybody down sort of in North London, that's going to be fine too because they're all at Notting Hill. You know, the whole thing is a complete disaster and they're all terrified of saying this thing is a waste of space, it creates criminality, it encourages people to fight the police, and it should be shut down because, quite frankly, it's not even British.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's hear a voice note from Nick reacting to Paul Richards, what Paul was saying, my guest there just before the break. This is what Nick says.
Paul Richards, every time I hear him, I just wonder what planet is he on. He doesn't realise. It's not that we don't want them in hotels. We don't want the illegal migrants here at all. And when he talks, when he's saying about taking the money back off hoteliers, that is written a contract to sign No wonder Labour's in such a mess if he's a former advisor.
Thank you. Let's hear one from Karen.
Hi, Peter. You're right. I mean, Paul Richards is wrong. I mean, hotels are being offered contracts way beyond 2029. So I know, and you know, that he's talking out of his proverbial bum.
I thought you were going to say talking out of his proverbial, and then it would end, and then you just said bum. So there we are. Thank you to that to Karen for that. Let's hear what Herbie in Harrow has to say about all of this. Herbie's given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say, Herbie?
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
Oh, here we go again. Look, listen, Peter, talk is easy and cheap. Doing is another thing completely. And I don't think that man has got a clue of what is going on. It's exactly what I was trying to say earlier on. We've been steered with a ship with no captain. There's nobody leading the way, nobody giving any incentives or any ideas of what to do. They haven't got a clue what to do. They've completely lost the plot totally across everything they're doing. You know that, Peter, as well as I do.
Herbie, thanks for your call. I really appreciate that. Let's hear from Tom in Rugby. I think Tom has some thoughts on loud people on public transport, a real bugbear of mine. What do you think, Tom?
Hi, Peter. Last time I journeyed from London to Rugby, I journeyed about 50 minutes. In a crowded carriage, I sat next to a very respectable-looking lady who turned out to be a professor at Warwick University. The moment we left the Euston, she rang a colleague and had a full-volume conversation for the entire journey. It was really intrusive. The whole carriage were annoyed. And, of course, because we were British and she was rather intimidating, no one said anything.
Nobody said anything. That's the problem. I mean, do people need to step up a bit more, Tom, and actually just go over and say, excuse me, you couldn't just, do your call somewhere else or do it later, or could you put headphones in or something like that?
Well, of course we could have done, we should have done. But as I say, we're very British, and the British are very reticent about that sort of thing. It's just in our nature.
Should she have been fined £1,000?
Who knows? Probably. But they wouldn't have got away with anything. She would just have said, I'm having a conversation with a colleague. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think if you're on a train or public transport, maybe short calls. I'm also, I'm someone who has a loud voice. I was once called by a colleague someone incapable of doing anything quietly. So I have a very loud sneeze as well. So I think that should probably be fined by about £1,000. Nodding heads behind the glass there from Ted, the producer, certainly the head of this station, Danny Morris, the Ayatollah of audio, I like to call him. He is someone who often comments on how loud my sneeze is. Thank you to Zorinus, who says, why can't the whole of Europe pool their resources and stop the boats coming from their home countries entering the parts of Europe that are vulnerable? Deals are not enough. It has to be a joint effort with all affiliated countries working together. Rebecca in Cambridge says, I would just like to commend Elliot from Bushy for his heartfelt call earlier. He eloquently described his absolute despair for the current state of our country, and it's very sad decline. I agreed with everything he said. Well, Rebecca, we're going to put that on social media. It's going to be at talkTV. It's also going to be, I'm going to retweet it from my account at Peter Cardwell. So certainly Elliot, I think, spoke for so many people with his call. We'll put some of it certainly on social media. Tracy says, morning Peter, I've noticed Paul never mentioned stopping the benefits, the hotels, the free medical care, the lawyers, because we know that would be the right deterrent. That's Tracy in Wakefield. And Ellie in Stirling says, I'm not really bothered about Angela Rayner buying a second home, but I am concerned that she's not sitting down with her boss asking him what on earth he is doing or not doing, to be precise, says Ellie in Stirling. Well, we'll talk more about what Keir Starmer is doing or not doing. You can, of course, let me know your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to talk to Peter Blexley in a second as well about a number of policing matters, including police officers in Scotland given English lessons amid fears over the standard of recruits and how they can communicate in English. Elliot in Bushy was talking about this previously. He was saying that you ring your local council and sometimes there aren't people who speak English fluently, so you try to make a complaint or say something. I think it is not a racist point. It's a perfectly legal and reasonable thing, to say, hold on a second here, guys. What we should do is have people who speak the language of this country. I don't care where people are from necessarily. If they're here legally and they're working for a council, they should be able, or indeed for the police, they should be able to speak English fluently. That should be one of the number one things, that qualifications that people should have to serve the public. But that's just not happening. We'll talk about the Notting Hill Carnival with Peter as well, where 140 revellers have been arrested in one day. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Some breaking news now on Talk, and that is that emergency services are responding after a helicopter has crashed in a field on the Isle of Wight. There's no information on casualties just at the moment, but the incident happened near the A3020 Shanklin Road this morning. In fact, just a couple of hours ago, 9:24, a Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary spokesman said, "We were called at 9:24 to report that a helicopter had come down in a field near the Shanklin Road. The road is closed due to a number of emergency services vehicles at the scene. Please avoid the area." A witness told the Isle of Wight County Press she was driving towards it when she saw the helicopter spiralling before it went out of sight and came down in a hedge. The spokesman for the air ambulance confirmed that had happened. An ambulance was called 4 minutes later, and the critical care team, consisting of a doctor and a specialist paramedic, are on the scene working alongside emergency service colleagues, and firefighters were called out a few minutes after that as well. So that is the breaking news, that a helicopter has crashed in a field on the Isle of Wight. If we get any more information about that between now and 1 o'clock, of course we will keep you updated on that. Right then, I want to talk to Peter Blexley now about the Notting Hill Carnival. Police have arrested 140 revellers on day one. Figures are up 40% on last year. Peter, great to have you on the programme. What is your reaction to the fact that those arrests have gone up 40%? Is this the Met doing their job, or is the Notting Hill Carnival even more dangerous this year than last year, do you think?
The Met Police is doing its very best to try and keep this carnival as safe as they possibly can, but they are facing a Herculean task. I congratulate them for making another 100 arrests last week in the run-up to the carnival. Those were people that they feared were going to commit acts of violence at the carnival. There will have been grounds to arrest them. Those arrests will have been lawful. People may have been wanted for other crimes. I would imagine the vast majority were gang members. And, of course, yesterday, facial recognition cameras led to the arrest of a dozen or more people. So well done to the Met in the absence of any legislative framework for deploying this technology. Where are all those voices from the lefty human rights lot last week that were banging on about how it was an infringement of people's liberties that these cameras were being deployed? Well, it would appear this morning that a number of potentially dangerous people, because they will have been wanted for other crimes, did not get there because they were arrested.
Is the actual carnival itself, is it policeable? Is it actually something that could be policed entirely safely, or should it be moved? Should it be scrapped? What's your view on this, Peter?
It's impossible to police it entirely safely, and that is a very worrying factor. The Commissioner of the Met, Sir Mark Rowley, was saying only a few weeks ago that his greatest fear is a mass casualty event by way of crushing, akin to the Hillsborough tragedy. That's how worried he is.
Well, that would just be awful, an unspeakable thing to happen. But for someone in such a senior role to say that that could happen again, or something like that could happen, well, clearly something has to be done about Notting Hill.
I completely agree. But because of the cultural sensitivities around this event, because of the fact that it was born out of immigration into the UK, people recognising Caribbean culture and wanting to celebrate that, I think that many people, from the organisers, certainly from the Mayor of London and other people in positions of responsibility, are afraid to grab this event and say, look, we want it to be safe. And my idea would be to move it to Hyde Park, which has a slightly smaller footprint than the carnival, but of course, so much of the carnival footprint is taken up with buildings, terraced houses, old-style townhouses that are 3 or 4 stories high, narrow streets, alleyways, housing estates, none of which would exist in Hyde Park that has a capacity of 350 acres. So a sizable piece of land. Put unscalable fences around Hyde Park, have barriers, knife arches, make it a ticketed event, considerable security, a police presence to deal with the exterior of Hyde Park, and hold the event more safely. Please, we don't want mass loss of life.
I want to talk to you as well about a couple of other things, Peter. Prisons possibly running out of space by March unless they release inmates early. This huge issue in prison capacity, still a big one, despite what Labour have done, letting loads of people out.
Yep, here we go again in increasingly lawless Britain. We've got more people that should be in jail than we have jail spaces for them. So what are we going to do? We're going to release the unworthy, the persistent criminals back out onto our streets, and guess what they're going to do? Because they won't leave those prison gates, sadly, rehabilitated, reformed and willing to contribute to society. I fear they will spill back out onto our streets with the sole intention of taking what they can from society illegally.
Peter, you care very, very deeply about the standard of policing in this country, about the standard of police officers in this country. What do you make of the story from Scotland about police officers who've been given English classes amid fears over the standard of their English?
Police officers possessed the most important power in the land, and that is to deny somebody their liberty. A very, very serious matter. In order to do that, police officers, of course, should be able to communicate properly and let people know why they are having the handcuffs slapped on. In fact, the two greatest attributes that a police officer can have is, number one, common sense, and number two, the ability to communicate. So here we have police services in the UK going from everybody's got to have a degree, and how well has that worked out, to now we're recruiting the illiterate, so we better teach them how to speak English and write English. What a nonsense. Policing is in absolute crisis, primarily because clowns are running the show.
The problem is a university degree doesn't guarantee anything anymore. I've come across a university graduate in an office. Someone I know was running an office. Graduate came in order to help, in order to do some work experience, and she said, could you address these envelopes for me? And the graduate of a university in this country could not address the envelopes, did not know how to address the envelopes. And when we have police officers who can't speak English and can't do that fluently, and it's not just in that area of life either, is it, Peter? It's I had a caller on earlier on saying he wanted to make a complaint to his council, and the council officers couldn't speak English either. It's not a racist point, it's a communication point. It's a straightforward point saying, if you're in this country doing a job where you have to communicate with people, surely you should be able to speak the language.
Communication is key in just about every walk of life. You're a communicator, it's how you make a living. I write and talk for a living. Communication is key to me, but it's also vitally important to anybody who is picking up the phone and speaking to a customer, for example. And it is incredibly important to a police officer who might turn up at any kind of situation, say a domestic violence dispute, to arresting someone, denying them their liability, to being involved in a large event like a concert, a football match, and the list goes on and on. Communication is key. If you can't speak English, please don't apply to join the police until you've gone off, had a course, and your competence has increased to an acceptable level.
You're a great communicator, Peter, and imagine, just for the sake of argument, that in the, say, early 2026 people wanted to hear you communicate more. What would you recommend they do?
Then I suggest they go to peterblexley.com and buy themselves a ticket for my one-man show, which is touring the entire UK in 2026. Thank you very much.
Good man, Peter. Thank you very much. That's Peter Blexley, former Metropolitan Police detective and our crime commentator here at Talk. Let's talk about the Notting Hill Carnival briefly with Mary from Hemel Hempstead. Mary, you're on the air. Thanks for your call to 03444991000. What would you like to say?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's become a place where they can have grievances. It's so changed from when it first started, because what happened was that the locals used to come out and join in. Now they have to barricade themselves inside. And it just seems to be the gangs are turning up, just as I say, to settle grievances. Drug dealing's taking place. It's a place of meeting to selling the drugs. It's just changed completely. It's like a lot of things nowadays has changed completely.
There are a lot of people who go, Mary, and have a nice time. And, you know, if you have 1 million, 2 million people arriving, some of them are having a good time.
Yes, I'm sure they are. But there's basically this undercurrent, though. And as Peter said himself, what's going to happen if, say, there's some sort of something happens, an explosion? I mean, you only want some Islamists to go there with a bomb.
Yeah, well, let's certainly hope that doesn't happen.
How the people there? It's all so narrow. It's a dangerous area.
Mary, I think a lot of people agree with you. Thank you for that. John in Bradford's been in touch about the story we had a little bit earlier on about the medics, the consultants who don't want and is really firm to supply them with medical supplies and drugs. John, what do you make of this story? You're very welcome to the programme.
Politics should never, ever come into the medical profession. You can't say you're not going to give these drugs to people who desperately need them. And also at the same time, if I may mention it, when there's people in this country saying they shouldn't sell arms to Israel, what they've got to understand is there's a lot of Israeli parts in British military equipment. So if Israel turns around and says, right, we're not going to supply you with them anymore, we're in trouble. And also, I think the Israeli government should turn around and say to Ireland, right, anything that's manufactured into your country is banned from coming in here.
Well, I don't want to get to that stage, John. And I also think that, look, these medics, in fairness to them, they're saying the supplies can come from elsewhere, but their argument is, well, this company, this Israeli company making these medical supplies, pays taxes to the Israeli government. The Israeli government do things that they disagree with. I mean, you could make that argument about anything. You could say, well, it's holding every Israeli person responsible for the Israeli government. About 3/4 of people don't like Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel. It's like, John, what it's like is someone saying, well, John, you're from the UK, therefore you absolutely agree with every single thing Keir Starmer does.
Well, no, I mean, a lot of Israelis don't agree with things that Netanyahu.
Correct, absolutely.
But the problem with Israel, it's lost the war. As far as politics is concerned, they should have gone in there far earlier. They should have allowed independent people to go in there and see what's happening.
I totally agree with you, John, with it on the journalism point. I do believe that journalists should have gone in at all times. The Israelis say they can't guarantee their safety. They could be kidnapped. To me, that's up to the journalistic organisations to look after those people and to deal with that as it goes on. And I would definitely advocate that journalists, independent journalists, be allowed to go into Gaza. We hear a lot about the journalists, in inverted commas, who are there at the moment. Tad has been in touch and says, Peter, this may sound far-fetched, but the more dire the problem, the more radical the solution. If the French are complicit in sending all their rubbish to the UK, is that not an act of war? What would we do if it was Putin sending us his surplus population? We can't really have one rule for one and one rule for someone else, can we? Says Tad. Plenty more to come, including from Liam Halligan. He'll be here with us in a second. The Economist, he's author of the Substack When the Facts Change. And Rachel Reeves could well be heading towards an International Monetary Fund bailout. What would that mean? Could that change things actually, perversely, for the better in terms of how this country runs? And also we'll talk about Trump. He's slapped hundreds of UK products with tariffs, up to 25%, from shampoo to washing machines. So we'll talk about that. We'll also take more of your calls, texts and tweets, and send your voice notes in as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
when this first started in Epping is that if they closed that hotel, this was policy collapse. Because it was kind of the lightning rod. This was one hotel and it has now spread. And unfortunately, the government is without a clue. And how they will push forward, we were just saying that we've got to have to hope that they've got these new centres going. But the amount that they're going to have to build and kind of renovate to get going is nowhere near ready. This is one of the reasons I think that they're really hoping to kind of drag out a legal case. But honestly, I do not know what they're going to do.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including some people on Twitter. I've just been having a quick look at my tweets there during the break. And Bootsy Cat, very much in favour of cats, of course. How did these officers pass an interview if they're unable to speak English? This person asked, or is it a cat? I don't know. Wendy J says, morning, Peter. What a treat having you on this morning. Greece is in the European Convention of Human Rights, yet they have stopped all immigration for 3 months. If anyone does arrive, they're detained and deported. So there's one thing we could do today if only Starmer had the political will and a backbone. Well, political will is behind all of this, Wendy. It's behind all of this. And actually, previously, the European courts have told us one thing, and we've done the opposite under David Cameron, very flawed Prime Minister in many ways. But one of the things he did that was very good was there was a ruling from a European court that said, right, you've got to give prisoners the vote. He said, we're not going to give prisoners the vote. We're going to ignore that ruling. Lots of other countries ignore supranational, so sort of international courts beyond the borders of different countries, and we could do it too. It is a matter of political will. I do believe in the rule of law, but I also think that the country has to come first. Lots of people getting in touch, including Richard from Hull, who says, I have a question. If some people got in a dinghy at Dover and headed towards France, how would the French authorities deal with them? Another person says, we all need a Peter Blexley in our communities. And Andrew says, surely the fact that police need English lessons proves just how low the standard of education has got, thanks to lefty teachers inventing their own curriculum. Well, one big problem is the money in the country. The International Monetary Fund could well be bailing us out at some point. There are economists who think that could happen because of the dire state of the economy. In the next few months, Rachel Reeves is going to be giving a budget. Will she be contradicting herself from last year? I think she will. And what kind of respect can we possibly have from her if she says one thing and does another? Let's talk all this through with Liam Halligan, who's an economist and author of the Substack When the Facts Change, which is, of course, a reference to When the Facts Change, I Changed My Mind, which J.M. Keynes allegedly said, but we think he might have been misquoted. Liam, great to have you on the programme. Are we heading towards an IMF bailout?
Well, good on you, Peter, for knowing that it might have been a misquote from Keynes when the facts change. You're a learned man. So, look, back in 1976, I remember it well, I was a kid. The UK had to go cap in hand to the International Monetary Fund for a bailout because the government of the time, under Jim Callaghan and Chancellor Dennis Healey, had spent too much. The public finances were in a mess. The balance of payments, the sort of external account, was in a mess. And Britain basically was insolvent. And I'm not here to be alarmist, and it doesn't give me any pleasure to say, but I follow financial markets very closely. I'm a former fund manager myself, as well as being a writer and broadcaster. And look, this is absolutely everyday speak in the markets, right? And yet the political and financial class, the political and media class, will not engage with what's actually happening.
Why won't they engage, do you think?
Because a lot of them are economically illiterate, Peter. A lot of them are economically illiterate, and they almost take pride in their economic illiteracy. I've spent a lifetime at the top of the British media. You know, I can't get this stuff on mainstream television. So that I'm using my Substack because I feel a heavy responsibility here as one of the few properly financially and economically literate people in the British media, if you like, with a platform, albeit increasingly these days my own platform. And I have to convey what is actually going on. When the 30-year gilt yield, which is the cost of government borrowing over 30 years, the annual interest payment, is 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, when it was 4.8 for a moment at the height of the Liz Truss mini budget crisis. And yet people are still, pretending, that Liz Truss crashed the economy, and it's just infantile. It's infantile to ignore what's happening.
What would it mean practically? We've had Stuart.
We'll come on to that. So, I had to get somebody serious on the record to say this, and so it took a lot of courage from Professor Jajit Chadha, who ran the National Institute for Economic and Social Research for almost a decade. The premier macroeconomic think tank. It is to respectable economic analysis what the IFS is to tax and spend policy.
Sure.
And Jajit Chadha, gave me this interview, and he's not an alarmist guy. He's not a Tory. He's not some kind of anti-Labour person. On the contrary, he's a very moderate person, which is why his warning is so incredible. And he says, look, we are heading for the same thing that happened in 1976 unless we change course, because the government, the Tories, left Labour with an awful inheritance. Labour have since been massively ramping up borrowing and spending, and we're going to drive the economy over a cliff.
And Stuart in Sheffield, Stuart in Sheffield has been in touch, he says, in the Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire. He says, can you ask Liam what an IMF bailout means for the general population? How would it actually affect us day to day?
So what it would mean, and it may not even be the IMF. The IMF may not be big enough. There may have to be some kind of even more international effort made if this happens. What it would mean is that interest rates, no one cares what the Bank of England's saying anymore. That's just mood music. Market interest rates have gone completely in the opposite direction, upward, and they have been doing that for well over a year, as some of us have been saying endlessly. It would mean that borrowing costs spike even more across the economy. That would push up inflation. That would then push up borrowing costs for government further. The pound, unfortunately, because no pleasure to say this, would come under pressure, and the government may face genuine difficulties making its payments. That's where we are. That's why people like Professor Jajit Chadha have said what they've said. And the Telegraph, I think, I gave them the full transcript to the interview with Jajit Chadha. People can also watch the full interview on my Substack when the facts change. But the Telegraph did a good job. They didn't just take Chadha's word for it, that they realised his importance. That's why they were then pursued the reporting of it. They got two other former members of the Monetary Policy Committee, Andrew Sentance and Willem Boyter. Again, not card-carrying Tories by any means. Boyter is a man of the left, but saying exactly the same thing, that this is a major problem. And Peter, you and I, we know a lot of the same people in politics. I didn't work at the top of government the way you did, though you know the people I know. I've tried really hard to warn, friends and colleagues in government now, to warn friends and colleagues in the other political parties that this is where we are.
Yeah.
And it is where we are. So let's not have ridiculous conversations about whether or not Rachel Reeves has missed her headroom by 9 or 5 billion in 2029, Peter, because in the last fiscal year, the OBR said we'd borrow 80 billion, right? And we borrowed 150 billion. So the forecast was 70 billion out.
Yeah.
1 year. So let's not have conversations about whether it's 5 billion out in 5 years. It's a completely facile debate.
Just before we get to the news, Liam, I just want to ask you about Trump's hundreds of products having tariffs on them, up to 25%, shampoo to washing machines and so on. What effect do you think this will have?
Well, look, you're doing exactly what we can't do, Peter. You're looking. Well, maybe I'm being unfair. We can't blame this on someone else.
I'm not blaming it on anybody. I'm just asking your opinion on what would happen.
We politically don't like. We have to look to ourselves. We have to look.
So what can we do? How can we get out of this?
The state needs to be smaller. The state is out of control. We've got 25% of people now who rely on the state directly for their living. We've got tens of thousands more civil servants, accelerating all the time than we had before COVID. We've got a political and media class, particularly a government front bench, that seems to have no grasp of anything to do with finance. There's no one in Downing Street the way there was under Blair and Brown. There were excellent people in Downing Street under Blair and Brown, many of whom I knew and respect to this day, some of whom have passed, people who really understood financial markets and were in the room when decisions were made. There's no one like that in Downing Street now, because I'm afraid, Peter, they've been ideologically excluded.
Very, very interesting. A real warning there, Liam. Thank you for that. Liam Halligan, economist and author of the Substack When the Facts Change. And you can watch that interview on his Substack as he says there. Thank you to Liam. In a few minutes, we're going to talk to Baroness Claire Fox. She is an independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas about everything that is around today. Let me read out some of your messages as well, especially about the Notting Hill Carnival. Mark in Selby has been in touch and says, Carnival has to move to survive. It should be safe for the families and children and curious people. The committee for Carnival, as there must be a bloated one, are to be held liable personally if they fail to heed good advice on safety and security. Pride may come before a fall, says Mark and Selby. And Sue in sunny Lytham, a great part of the world, some family there. Peter, I stopped what I was doing when I heard the Labour person you were talking to suggest the government get the hotel owners housing the migrants to refund the taxpayers' money for charging too much to house these people. I could not believe what I was hearing. What an idiotic thing to say. We are a country sinking into a sea of morons. God help us. Love your show. Sue, thank you very much indeed. I mean, I don't think these people should be profiteering. I don't think that there should be, there should be huge amounts of money given to hotel owners. I don't want any hotel owner to make any money, but I do think going back on a contract would be a very, very serious thing to do, and that's why I challenge Paul, and thanks for your backup on that, Sue, and a few other people as well. I don't want hotel owners to be, well off. I don't want anybody in those hotels. What do you think of all of this? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Plenty more to come in the final hour of the programme coming in a few minutes.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. I'm here right through until 1 o'clock and then back with Drive on Friday between 4 and 7. Jeremy's here with Drive Monday to Thursday. I'll be back on Friday with Drive between 4 and 7. Lots to talk about today in the next hour, including the 7 and 10 people who say Keir Starmer is handling migration badly. Nigel Farage says he would prioritise British citizens over foreigners. We're talking as well about Gen Z employees, young adults increasingly looking for traditional office jobs as they've become unhappy happy while working from home. That's according to new research. Lots of people want to get in on the phones, add your voice to that. On Labour, on Angela Rayner's new flat, £800,000 apparently. On courtesy in public, playing music, the Conservatives say that they want to fine people up to £1,000. Well, the law basically exists already, it's just not enforced. Also, asylum, lots of people want to get in on that. Let me know your thoughts. Give me a ring. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can also send me a tweet at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a WhatsApp voice message or a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring. All three of those on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us for the next hour. Should say Jonathan Gullis is coming up between 1 and 4, then Jeremy back in the seat between 4 and 7, and then between 7 and 10 Mark Dolan will be here. Lots to discuss. I've actually got a tweet here from someone called Ross McCafferty. He says an Irish president never signed a condolence book for Hitler. For your information, we talked about that earlier on. I mean, that is just incorrect. Eamon de Valera was the president. He was the Taoiseach and Minister for External Affairs. He went on to be the President of Ireland. At the time, in 1945, he was the Taoiseach and the Minister for External Affairs. He visited the German legation in Dublin on the 2nd of May 1945 and conveyed condolences on the death of Adolf Hitler. We also know that declassified results reveal that the Irish President Douglas Hyde also offered official condolences to the German representative in Dublin shortly after Hitler's death. That is a historical fact, Ross, I'm afraid. Let's talk to Claire Fox, Baroness Fox, who's an independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas, about all the stories we're talking about today, including something I just want to show you. I just want to show you this footage, actually, just before we talk to Claire. This is someone who was putting up an England flag on a lamppost, and they alleged that a firebomb was thrown at them. Now, this footage, I should say, if you're watching it, I'll describe it to you if you're listening. But if you're watching, it does have the person's face is bloodied, so I'm just going to urge a little bit of caution before that, but let's have a look at this footage.
Move the car, bro. Putting flags up, got petrol bomb. Let's go. Just finished a night, 3 hours of flagging, and our boy has just been petrol bombed. Petrol bomb thrown at the car, smashed straight onto his head. Patriots putting the other Patriots together. We've just been attacked with a petrol bomb. Police are here.
That is a group calling themselves Stevenage Patriots on Instagram. Claire Fox is independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas. Claire, great to have you on the programme. We're in a majorly bad situation where an awful lot of people are protesting. Some of them putting up England flags are being attacked. We know that there were about 15 arrests over the weekend as well. What do you make of the state of this and the state of the debate and the action people are taking in regard to migration, Claire?
Well, in relation to the flags, that terrible scene of the attack is a real shame, because actually the raising the flag has been a rather joyous community positive statement, I think, of people feeling that they wanted to do something that gave a sense of solidarity, and they started putting the flags up. And the original group that started this actually also were organising community litter picking, and were going down and helping at the local food banks, so it had very much that kind of civil society taking responsibility, a pride in one's country, patriotism, and so on. Now, you'll know from where your background, from where you're from, Peter, that we know that putting up the flags can be contentious. I'm not trying to be overly rosy-eyed about this, because I do understand. But I do think that it's driven by a very positive attempt at asserting that people should not be ignored, and that there's nothing wrong with believing in your nation state, being patriotic and believing in the country you're from. And this has been something which has been driven out of public life and demonised up until now. The second thing is that the sort of showing and wearing of flags has become quite the political de rigueur activity over recent years. It's just that they were different flags. So we've had the progress flag around the LGBTQ, which is highly divisive. has taken over many a town hall, waved everywhere at any opportunity.
Sorry, Claire, I just have to stop you there and give it its full title, which is the LGBTQIA $?ampersand $. I mean, it just goes on forever, doesn't it? Yeah, thank you.
I know. I could have been absolutely cancelled for not doing the full.
That's right, and you could have been here until 1 o'clock giving it its full title.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as we know, it's been a highly politicised thing, and we're all aware of the Gaza flag. So all I'm saying is that when councils come round and start taking them down officially, which we have seen in a number of places, it's absolutely insulting and ludicrous because they've been putting them up, just different flags.
And we also have places like Birmingham where they say it's not safe to take down the Palestinian flag, which is not the flag of this country and is being used and weaponized for a particular purpose, but they do think it's safe and have taken down Union flags and England flags.
Exactly. So the whole thing strikes also as kind of two-tier. And so I'm just making the point that it could be and should be welcomed as a positive community move. Unfortunately, it's now looks like it could be a source of tension. I hope that attack isn't, we're not going to see very many of those kind of actions. But I think that because councils actually behaved in such an intolerant way, as you described, taking down the flags, they've actually stirred up the tension. They'll probably accuse the people putting the flags up of stirring up tension. Actually, I think it's those people who are officially dragging it down. And that then gives a green light to a more lively response, like we saw with that gentleman who was, this could have been very serious. Firebombing is not a joke. And being hit by a bottle is not a joke anyway. But I'm hoping that will calm down.
Yeah. I wonder as well what you make of the plans. Certainly the Bell Hotel is a very controversial one. The government is saying that it wants to keep it open. It says it has to be closed, or at least the migrants taken out of it in an orderly way. My point to Paul Richards a little bit earlier on, a former Labour special advisor, was if the government can't close one hotel now, how are they going to close 200 hotels between now and 2029?
Exactly. I mean, the hotels issue, it is a lightning rod, and I've been listening to the programme, and people are rightly worried that if the only solution is even that they close down the hotels and then just move people into local communities, into houses of multiple occupancy or what have you, then that's not satisfactory either. But I think that you started off by talking about Keir Starmer not being popular in relation to immigration. There's just a feeling of a lack of will, a lack of political will from the top at dealing with this. And I think that when it comes to the hotel protests, I think they've been hugely successful in pushing this issue into the mainstream. Somebody recently said, I read a newspaper article said, this has all been whipped up by Nigel Farage and Reform, and it's just come about in the last few weeks. Well, they just haven't been paying attention. These issues have been a source of tension in local communities for a long, long time.
And being ignored, Claire. And that's why people think it's whipped up. That's why people think, this is all the far right. This is all Nigel Farage. Exactly. It's not. It's people. I spoke to Karen McIver yesterday in the studio, who's heavily involved with this protest, and she's the Reform UK branch secretary in Epping. And she's a mum. She's involved with her local political party, but this hasn't come out of nowhere. And the political class saying it has come out of nowhere, it's just absolute nonsense. I remember with the council elections a few months ago, where I had quite a senior journalist in Westminster who was talking to me, a political journalist in Westminster, and said, "Gosh, I can't understand all these people voting for Reform and where this has come from." I could have told them where it was coming from for the last 4 years I've been on this programme. The thing is that so few people, so few politicians, you're one of them, Claire, actually listen to the people.
Yeah, but it's exactly right the way you're explaining it. Is a lot of the commentators have got it the wrong way round, which is that actually it's not that Reform has whipped anything up. The question we have to ask is, why is Reform so successful? And it's precisely because Reform is the vehicle through which those people who've been ignored for so many years are attaching themselves. So, one of the things that's really extraordinary is that there was an attempt at saying, we don't have to take the Epping protest seriously because it was organised by somebody from the Reform Party. And it's like, well, you might ask yourself why the Reform Party has captured the hearts and minds of so many millions of people, according to the polling, and why ordinary people are deserting the mainstream parties because they just do not believe that they will act decisively on this question. So your point about they won't act it's become almost impossible to move people out of the Epping hotel. So how are they going to achieve their goal? You have to be decisive and say that you're treating this as not necessarily a national emergency, but you are doing things with a sense of urgency without letting the bureaucratic machine get in the way. We know that extraordinary things can happen. The example is always used, but we might as well continue to use it. During lockdown, which was a terrible period, but the government said, we are now going to do these extraordinary things. I mean, some of them were extraordinary, like getting rid of all the rules on how you make medicines and creating the vaccine. But also the Nightingale hospitals, all these things were done and achieved.
And even under Labour as well, the Scunthorpe plant, the steel, they recalled Parliament on a Saturday, they passed the legislation today. It's about political will. Claire, I just have two more questions for you before you go. One is Nigel Farage has talked about getting reform peers in the House of Lords to join you and others in the House of Lords. Could you see yourself joining Reform UK?
I am an independent, and I think that Nigel would be the first to admit that I'm so awkward squad that even he wouldn't want me. But I'm definitely enthusiastic about the fact that reform should have peers in the House of Lords, by the way. And those people, there was a discussion in the House of Lords about this, by the way, and there was a sort of somebody suggested it, and there was an absolute sniffy response. We don't want that type in here. And there's no sense in which the House of Lords even pretends on occasion that it represents the country. Now, it's bad enough that it's unelected, but if it can't understand that it needs to be properly representative of the country, they talk about inclusion and diversity all the time in the House of Lords. Well, this is one inclusion and diversity question they should embrace.
Diversity and free speech, except for people who disagree with us. It's interesting as well. There are actually smaller parties in Parliament. The Ulster Unionists, for example, have one MP, and they have, I think, 3 members of the House of Lords, if I remember correctly.
Exactly.
Claire, and the final question before you go, Claire, is about this issue about £1,000 fines for playing music on public transport. Have you been on public transport? Have you heard people blaring music, blaring out of their phones or whatever, and thought, actually, hold on a second, stop this? And what do you think the legal sanction should be?
Yeah, I'm never quite keen on giving the state more power to fine people, but that to one side, of course, I, like everyone else, and it's not just my age, I think, just gets completely irritated by the antisocial nature of the blaring of the music. And I think that it sort of speaks to a general incivility, doesn't it? You know, we talk about lawless Britain,
absolutely,
but it's not just that. It's just the sort of sense in which there's no respect. And I think in some ways, there's an article in the paper today by Robert Toombs, the historian, talking about, is this the start of the English Revolution? And I do feel as though people have just had enough. Enough is enough, and that can include, people putting their feet up on the tubes, blaring their music and just generally showing no respect for the country we live in. And I think that if we as civil society start organising against that and actually telling people to turn the music down rather than calling out the council and threatening them with a fine, I think that would be a better way to go myself.
Claire, thank you. It's common sense, as always, from Claire Fox, Baroness Fox, who's an independent peer, a director of the Academy of Ideas. Plenty of calls, texts, tweets and voice notes coming up. We're also going to talk before the end of the programme about migration and indeed Gen Z employees, Gen Z employees, young adults increasingly looking for traditional office jobs. They've become unhappy working from home. Tell us your view on all of that. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has been in touch, including Geordie Ormani, who says, great show today, busy decorating. I've been listening all morning. Well, all the very best with your decorating. Hope the show is helping things move along there. And I suppose at this point I should say you missed a bit, because that's obviously the law. Mac Enza says, please tell me why nothing works in the UK. Do you blame politicians, special advisors, the civil service, or other influences? How do we fix it? I mean, that's a very big question, Mac. And I think that I'm not sure I can answer it in a couple of minutes. A lot of why nothing works in the UK is because it's been neglected for such a very long time. There have been so many different governments that have said, well, someone else will deal with it. Short-termism is a big, big problem. We need to make really, really bold decisions. We need politicians and leaders and civil servants who don't worry about being unpopular, who actually want to fix things and be radical and change things. And that sort of idea of not caring, not caring, that's wrong actually, but not feeling as if you can't be bold, not feeling as if radical action can't be taken, well, that's something that matters. Money is a big issue as well, but it's also about spending money properly, efficiently, and listening to the people, which I think so many politicians do not. Lord Barrington has been in touch. Says, great interview with Liam Halligan a bit earlier on, but very scary. I cannot believe the economic mismanagement is down to incompetence. It is deliberate. Our government are destroying our country on purpose. Let's speak to Ashley in London regarding Paul Richards and asylum hotels. Ashley, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
I was just sitting there listening to it, and I was just thinking to myself, it sums up why everything is so wrong. Because they just don't understand. These people in politics don't understand business. They don't understand how things work. I was sitting there thinking, well, you know, my daughter lives in Epping, and, you know, they've got the issue with the hotel and everything at the moment. But it's, you know, these people, that yes, they're paying these hoteliers money, but they're agreeing to it. And to think, oh, you can take that money back, and we're going to put these people now into houses, we disperse them. So where are these houses that they're going to disperse these thousands and thousands of people to? My daughter's thankfully been in a position now to buy somewhere, but she was renting before that, and it was really difficult. You know, probably 5 or 6 people, 7 people to every one property trying to get. So they're going to take all these properties, pay loads of money to landlords to get these properties. It's going to put the prices up for everyone else, right? So it's going to create another problem from a problem, right? So the reality is, you know, my book, I mean, I don't have the total answers, but, you know, people who come in the country, we are seen and perceived to be a complete open border. You don't have to do anything, and you're given everything. And we have to stop that view. And that's, you know, that deterrent, just those words, right? I mean, that it's not that easy. Are we going to bother? Right, needs to come into it, and that's, you know, if you throw your passport or you throw your papers over the side of the boat, you're going to make it very clear that the tick list for your what allows you to come into the country or be assessed as an asylum seeker goes out the window, right? So we want these people to come over with certain paperwork. So if they are genuine, they get processed, and if they're not genuine, you've got the passport, the information, or where they come from, and you can send them back, right? So it's all about the deterrent and making it clear. And these politicians just don't seem to have any idea, or they want to be too nice to these people. And, you know, there's people that have suffered, and you've got to accept that, and, you know, we should be helping. But you have to be hard. You know, we have to treat everyone as coming over, that potentially these people could be a threat. They could be an issue in this country, and then we then downgrade that as we assess them when they do come here. But we do it the opposite way around. No, it's no problem. I mean, I was past the Bell pub the other day, Bell Hotel. You know, people were sitting outside. I noticed they put the barriers up, walking up and down the road. Our friends have, you know, people have been going in the shops, and they've been nicking stuff out the shops, and, you know, they come in the country, they dump people, the government, and they just don't do anything with them. They just kind of leave them. So ultimately, they're going to go out and create a problem.
Well, I just wonder, I mean, if you ask a Labour politician, where is the deterrent? And I mean, Keir Starmer, when I asked him this a couple of times, actually a couple of different interviews I did with him, he said, well, you know, smashing the gangs is the deterrent. I just don't think that's a deterrent at all. And now they're saying that this one in, one out scheme is a deterrent. I mean, Ashley, do you believe them?
No, it's ridiculous. I mean, I swear to you, they're laughing, right? They're sitting there going, "Oh, what a deterrent that is." It's not a deterrent. Is that you will automatically be sent back if you don't come with the paperwork. If you come in and you don't meet the criteria, you don't get access to a human rights lawyer that we pay for. If you don't tick those boxes that meet the criteria for an asylum seeker in this country, right, you do not have access to using our system to try and appeal for years and spend thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of our money trying to force people because they don't want to go back because the chicken nuggets aren't good enough where they come from, right? I know I'm extreme with what I'm saying there, but...
No, I know what you mean, but that was one of the excuses given. I mean, that is a perfectly reasonable thing to say, Ashley. You make all your points are absolutely reasonable. We've just got to move on because Matt in Cheshire is waiting. He has given us a ring on 0344 499 1000. Matt, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, good afternoon, Peter.
Hi there.
It's been my view for about 3 years that the last government and this government have been allowing the worst and most violent men into Britain, and the French have been filtering out their worst and basically pushing them into that corner of France.
Do you think it's that organised, Matt?
I mean, if we trust anybody that trusts the French on this issue is a nutcase. It's pretty obvious from what happened in America. Joe Biden allowed millions of prisoners, violent criminals, and Trump was saying they're emptying lunatic asylums, prisons, sending their worst. He wasn't saying that for a laugh. He was actually telling the truth. People were being murdered. People were being raped. This is basically the Labour Party and the Democrats are Antifa supporters. The radicals. They're not politicians. They're just activist lunatics. So the more dangerous, violent, and scary people they put around Britain's streets, they think they're going to benefit from that. They think they will benefit from the chaos that's caused.
Do you really think that's the game plan here? Is that not? We're not being too cynical. I've never, just because you're cynical doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong, Matt. But do you really think that's happening?
Peter, it's just happened in America.
Okay, all right.
We've just got rid of a completely atrocious, useless president who everybody just turned their back on and thought, oh my God, how have I voted for this man? We've now got a clone of that in Britain. We've got the same things happening in Britain. They had people in hotel rooms in New York staying in plush 5-star apartments that were going around the streets, sort of beating up the police and murdering people. So what we've got is the same thing, but on sort of a less violent level.
Matt, really interesting to talk to you as always. Thank you for your call. Grace is in London and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Grace, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hey, I think people across the political spectrum, aside from maybe a few centrists, are angry with Starmer, whether they're from the left or the right. I think most people are a bit annoyed with how things are getting on. I certainly am. But I'm reminded, since you mentioned conference season coming up, that last year at conference season, he said we're not a nation that hates our neighbours. And I heard you the other day mention a Good Samaritan who had helped one of the listeners who unfortunately had a fall.
Yeah, it was Carol in Liverpool. Yeah, she's feeling a bit better now, which is good. But
good.
There was a Good Samaritan. Yeah.
But it brought to my mind that that phrase comes from Jesus being asked, what should someone do? And Jesus says you should love your neighbour. And this person asks, who is my neighbour? And then Jesus proceeds to tell the parable of the Good Samaritan, which is about helping people who are not necessarily like ourselves and who we might presume we don't want to like. And a fundamental thing that's ingrained in our culture, as shown by the fact that we use the phrase Good Samaritan, is that we have actually somewhere historically the idea that not everyone who's from a culture we might not share should necessarily be seen as an enemy. We should actually have
I agree with all of that.
Humanity and regard for people from other parts of the world.
I agree with all of that, Grace, and I know that your faith is something that's really, really important to you. I suppose the question then comes when you look at how compassionate we have been, for example, towards Ukrainians who've been through a horrible war. We know as well that there are still some Ukrainians who are living in people's homes right now. I know some of our viewers and listeners have had that experience as well. Where does the point come, Grace, where Christian charity is kind of taken advantage of, actually, and we do need to properly have a think about who we take in from our borders.
There obviously needs to be a much better system for ensuring that people who come are the people who most need to come, because the reality is that there is a complete mixture. There are some people coming who absolutely have no moral right to come, but there are also some people coming from terrible situations. And so I feel that people kind of protesting outside hotels, seemingly making the presumption that everyone inside the hotel is a threat, is not particularly helpful. And though there's a lot of media given to the situation with small boats and hotels, in reality, a lot of the problems in our country are linked to some people, such as the hotel owners. I heard one of you talking to a guest earlier who was talking about people who own these hotels making a ton of money. Now, you're right that they can't be prosecuted for making that money, but it is things like that.
Well, on that, Grace, well, you're absolutely right, Grace, and that, but that was a government decision to give them the money in the first place. I don't think the hotel owners can really be blamed for that per se, although you could say it's immoral or whatever. It's still capitalism to a degree, and maybe that's immoral. Some people think that. I don't personally. Grace, really interesting thoughts as always from you. That's Grace in London. Let's hear a couple of voice notes, including Clive on the police and facial recognition.
If you think about it, we've had facial recognition technology for decades and decades and decades, because some years ago when we actually had policemen out on the streets, they'd recognise criminals, grab them and bang them up inside. So modern technology is just replacing the copper on the beat.
It's a very interesting point. Let's hear from Patrick.
Hi, Peter. It's Patrick in Derby here. I love the way you managed to get a plug in there for Peter Bleksley's upcoming show, which gave me a thought. You're a political animal. I'm a political animal. Do you have any thoughts as to how we could find out more about political animals? Love to hear from you.
Patrick, you're very funny. I do. I mean, listen, Ofcom regulations allow me to mention, because you've mentioned it, I haven't mentioned it, you've mentioned it, and you've asked me that question. I do have a new book out. It's called Political Animals. It's about animals in politics, as the name would suggest. It's got interviews and contributions from 4 Prime Ministers: Boris Johnson, David Cameron, Keir Starmer, and indeed Rishi Sunak. It's also got the first interview with Sue Gray since she left Number 10, believe it or not, and it's about cats. It's out on the 16th of September. Patrick, you're a naughty man, but you're very, very welcome in this programme anytime. We'll talk more about the migration situation and about Gen Z employees increasingly looking for traditional office jobs. Guess what? They're a bit lonely. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk more about migration. Lucy White is with me. She's a public policy specialist. Lucy, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for joining us. 7 in 10 people saying Keir Starmer is handling migration badly. What do you think?
Hi, Peter. Great to be here. I would say, why is it not 10 out of 10 people? Who are these 3 in 10 people that think he's handling it well?
In fairness, it's only 11% of people who think he's handling it well. 18% of people don't know. So there we are. I don't know about the other 0.1%. Maybe they declined to answer or something, but it's actually only 11% of people think he's handling it well. But yes, in every 100 people, there will be 11 people who think he's handling it well.
Yeah, perhaps those people are living in a place in the UK which is quite sheltered or quite away from a big city, or they haven't yet had to deal with the migrant crisis.
Yeah, on a straightforward basis. I wonder what you think about all the protests that have happened. Let's just watch that video one more time as well from Stevenage. Actually, this is someone who's putting up an England flag and was, they say, firebombed. Now, this footage has blood on the person's face, so you may want to look away if you're distressed by that image. But let's have a look at this.
Move the car, bro. Putting flags up, got petrol bomb. Let's go. Just finished a night, 3 hours of flagging, and our boy has just been petrol bombed. Petrol bomb thrown at the car, smashed straight onto his head. Patriots putting the other Patriots together. We've just been attacked with a petrol bomb. Police are here.
That was a video from Stevenage Patriots, as they call themselves, on Instagram. Lucy, that's an extreme thing that has happened. A lot of the protest has been completely safe and legal, and there have been about 15 arrests over the weekend, but most people who've been protesting have done so peacefully. But the level of anger, clearly very high.
Yeah, it's clearly very high, and what we're going to see is more and more protests until the migrants go. So the only solution is to have mass deportation, because we cannot cohabit and live in this way. I mean, we will continue to see civil unrest, and if you look at the top 10 countries that are claiming asylum in our country, I can read those countries. It's Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Eritrea, Bangladesh, India, Sudan, Syria, Vietnam, and Somalia. And a lot of those countries have very different cultures to us, very different religions to us, very different ways of life. And so for the government to expect these illegal migrants, who are predominantly men, to come into our country and think that everything is going to be okay it's just insanity.
What do you make of the story on the front page of the Daily Express? This is a gang master saying small boats crisis is Labour's fault. An Albanian people smuggler claims the government should stop small boats from crossing the channel tomorrow if it truly wanted to. He says Labour isn't stopping the boats because it needs a cheap workforce willing to do undesirable jobs. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I definitely think that the government could stop the small boats tomorrow. We know that for sure. We just need to stop the benefits to the hotel, the pull factors into the UK. But the claim about the workforce, I think. Well, the issue is we do have a minimum wage, which is quite high in this country. So even if you were bringing in cheap labour, they would still have to follow the labour laws. What worries me is that it's often the white working class men who are at risk of losing a job, or, we have the DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion policies, which sometimes favour those from ethnic minority backgrounds over the white working class. So I would agree that, yes, Labour government can stop the crisis overnight, essentially, if it wants to. But I think the argument that it's for cheap labour, I think for sure there are some companies absolutely profiting off this, but the fact that we do have fairly strong labour laws in the country hopefully would prevent that. But the issue is we're seeing a rise of illegal working. So if you take Deliveroo, Uber Eats, etc., we see lots of illegal migrants are working in that economy, which their wages will be suppressed, and we'll see more and more illegal migrants working in the black economy, essentially.
Lucy, thank you. That's Lucy White there, who's a public policy specialist. Let's speak to Martin in Dagenham, who has some thoughts on asylum hotels. Martin, you're very welcome to the programme.
Yes, good afternoon. Just regarding the council wanting to shift the people into HMOs.
Yes. Just for people who don't know what HMOs are, they're homes of multiple occupancy. So essentially, a house usually that was there split up into flats.
Yeah. So basically, with the migrant hotels where they're not sort of fit for purpose, because they're no longer hotels.
Yeah.
With an HMO, before people start getting greedy and wanting to charge the council loads of money to house these migrants, they'll probably find it very, very difficult to get insurance. So, hopefully that would be sort of...
Well, I know what you mean, and I think there will be some problems with this. There's also huge amounts of money, Martin, that are being offered to people who have these properties as well.
Yeah, because I actually rent property out, and I made sure with the agents that they don't deal with asylum seekers, otherwise I wouldn't go down that road with them.
Have you been offered money to do so? Have you been offered more money than you would have already got, Martin?
They said that they didn't deal with asylum seekers.
Oh, okay.
If they did, then I would have happily gone with someone else. It's not about the money, it's the principle of things.
Okay, Martin, thank you very much indeed. That's Martin in Dagenham. Harry's in Portsmouth and has some thoughts on Angela Rayner. She's bought a third home. She has a Grace and Favour apartment, which she doesn't pay for, in Admiralty House, which is in London, central London. And she also has a home in her constituency. She's bought a new place in Brighton as well and has been criticised for that. If it's her money, maybe she should not be criticised for it. Harry, what do you think?
That flat, is it Hove actually? Because that was always an important distinction between Brighton and Hove.
Oh, right, okay, yes.
One city.
Uh-huh.
It was always a little local joke. People who lived in the Hove were always superior. And I have a funny feeling she might have bought in Hove, but that's my guess.
It's like people who say they live in Chiswick, but they don't. They actually live in Acton.
There is a parallel thing. I remember before the election, Rachel Reeves said she was a social democrat.
Mm-hmm.
Before the election, they were all interviewed. Keir Starmer said he was a socialist, and I believe Angela Rayner considers herself to be a socialist. But by buying a second property, it's my view that she's a capitalist now. She's no longer a socialist. Now, there was a parallel thing with Ken Livingstone. Way back in 2001, the Brighton Argus newspaper found out that Livingstone, the mayor of London, had bought a flat in Brighton. And as ever, at that time, there was a terrible housing waiting list. And they pointed out how come people are coming down from London and yet people in Brighton can't get their council houses because there's obviously lack of space.
It's almost as if there could be people on the left who say one thing and do another, Harry. It's quite strange, isn't it? What do they call that? Oh, it's hypocrisy, don't they?
Yeah, it's funny that, because you had Paul Richards tied up in knots with some red tape from the Labour Party manifesto. It'd come loose because a few months ago he was sticking rigidly to the manifesto script, and yet this morning, you talking to him, it seemed like he was doing quite a bit of undoing of that red tape binding the Labour manifesto.
Listen, he's good to come on, but certainly I disagree with him. I don't disagree with you, Harry. I think you made some really good points there, and thank you for them. As Harry in Portsmouth. If you want to get your voice on the air between now and 1 o'clock, do give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. You can send me a voice note on that number as well. You can also send me a text message 87222. Make sure to put the word talk in your text. Jonathan Gullis is coming up at 1 o'clock. Between now and then, we're going to talk to Maxwell Marlowe. He's Director of Research at the Adam Smith Institute. Young adults increasingly looking for traditional office jobs. They've become unhappy while working from home. We'll talk about that and anything else you want to talk about. As I say, give me a ring. 0344 499 1000.
when you look at the system, in one way it boils down to two very simple metrics. You've got to reduce the number of people who are coming in to apply for asylum. The inflow has got to be lessened, and the outflow of people being processed and when they are refused being returned to their country or another safe country has got to be increased.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Plenty of comments coming in about public transport and bad behaviour. There's a policy from the Conservatives today, very, very similar to a policy of the Liberal Democrats a few weeks ago. Well, more than a few weeks ago, it was before the local elections, when they said fine people up to £1,000 for blaring out bad music, or just music in general, on public transport. The law actually exists already, so they're kind of both wrong. But Rafi says, same experience. I asked for shoes off seats on South Western Railway. I was threatened with a punch in the face. The Metropolitan Police's response, is it worth it? I.e., why bother saying anything? Transport police waiting for pension as ex-police. They do not care. They are not interested. Well, some of those people with their feet on the seats are young people. Not all of them, of course, but there is a lack of respect in this country. But how do they work? What do they do? Gen Z, of course, Gen Z, as I probably should call it, employees, young adults increasingly looking for traditional office jobs as they become unhappy while working from home. This is 4 in 10 16 to 24-year-olds say they feel lonely or socially isolated because of their work circumstances, a significantly higher proportion than any other age group. I'm not one of those people who says working from home is always a bad thing. I have a very good friend who works from home quite a lot, who is someone who works incredibly efficiently and does an awful lot and works far more efficiently than in the office. Sometimes some of the work I do, like writing my book, for example, someone mentioned it earlier, Political Animals, out on the 16th of September, is something that I do working from home, and that's that it can be a relatively lonely experience. Maxwell Marlowe is Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute and is with us now. Maxwell, what do you make of this research?
Well, I'm calling you from home now, Peter, so it feels a bit weird. I'm usually in the studio with you. But yeah, this is really interesting. This is from Bupa. They've done an 8,000-person survey of their members, and they've found, obviously, a significant number of young people want to come back into the office. And I'm not surprised at all about this. We know that young people, since the lockdowns, have, felt isolated, having to work from home, not getting those skills that you get when you're in an office. Secondly, the job market is actually really difficult at the moment, obviously. The big increase in national insurance contributions have frozen a lot of young people out. We've got almost 1 million young people who aren't in employment at the moment because they find the job market way too difficult. It's really concerning. But the third thing is, though, Peter, I wouldn't be disparaging of young people about this. A lot of them have tried to make their own way. They've tried to be influencers online. They've tried, their own little bit of shopkeeping by, using eBay or Vinted or whatever else. And they've just found that's not working. So they want to go back to the office.
I actually spoke to a young woman yesterday, 26 years old, really, really smart young woman, lots to give, who just didn't quite know what she wanted to do. She's got a law degree from a good university. And she just said she sent out dozens of different applications. I heard from someone previously on the show yesterday, actually a little bit older, talking about 1,200 CVs. The job market's really, really tough at the moment.
It's horrible. It's really horrifying. We see a lot of that data coming out as well from the government. And there's some really interesting economics research out there, actually, which shows the job prospects for people who graduate into a really dire job market, how it affects them for the rest of their life. And it's really concerning because we know people who graduated during the last recession or the great financial crash, whatever else, that has stuck with them over the course of their careers. And for young people, actually such as myself, who did graduate, just after the lockdowns, it's been really, really hard to find, good work in offices with older people who can teach you the skills. So this is going to last us, for decades. I'm really not surprised with this research at all. It's quite concerning. But if you're an employer out there, do take a chance on a young person. They've got a lot to give, is what I'll say to that.
How old are you, Maxwell, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 25, turning 26 this year.
So you're just about in this category, and this is a Bupa survey of 8,000 adults. They're talking about loneliness as well. Are there a lot of people your age and younger who are lonely, do you think? Not just because of work, but just in general?
Totally, yeah. It's really bad. I mean, there are a few ways you can measure that. For example, why is it young people aren't drinking so much at the moment? It's actually because pubs are so expensive. They're not socialising with each other. Try living in central London with a lot of my mates live outside of central London. Trying to organise to socialise with them is quite difficult because the trains are too expensive to get in. One of my mates has got to spend 40 quid, a day coming into work because he lives out in the Cotswolds. So that's really difficult for a lot of young people. And there's also social media. People feel really isolated there too. It's what we call, a really complex, difficult issue, which I don't think government policy is going to be able to fix fundamentally. I think it's an attitudes thing and how we shift society to combat those really big loneliness issues that young people are facing.
How much is lockdown part of this, do you think? The 16-year-olds who are part of this, who are maybe working, or 18-year-olds working, they will have come through lockdown. You were at university during lockdown as well. That must have been a pretty isolating experience.
It was horrifying. We had Zoom University, spending 9,000 odd quid a year just to be lectured on via Zoom. It felt like YouTube. I mean, what on earth am I paying for? But also meant I wasn't getting those, people skills that, I've got friends who were at university before lockdown, spoke about all these great parties they're going out, socializing, making connections through internships and work. Not happening, right? So it's stayed with a lot of us, and I lost friends to suicide over lockdown.
So
as
sorry
well.
to hear that.
Yeah, it was really horrible. But we said for so long this was what is going to happen. With this terrible situation, and policymakers just put their heads in the sand. They didn't want to listen. So, but I speak to friends from up north where I'm from as well. And, they have exactly the same stories. I went to university in London. I've got friends who went to university in Scotland and North of England. It was exactly the same throughout. And young people really were ignored during this period. I spoke to one of my contacts in the Treasury about, what was the policy-making decision, during lockdown? And they were quivering, do we open the cafes first or do we open the universities? And the universities were basically left to the end of that. So, it was a really, really unfair thing to lock people, to lock young people down for a disease that didn't really affect them. It affected older people. So it was baffling, and it's going to stay with us for the rest of our lives fundamentally.
Thank you very much indeed. A pretty grim picture there from Maxwell, but thank you for it nonetheless. Maxwell Marlowe, their Director of Public Affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. Paul in Southampton is on the line. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Paul, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hello, Peter. Nice to speak to you.
You too.
I was just sort of watching your interview with Paul Richards and watching that blue vein in your skull trying to pop. I can't understand why everybody's arguing about these migrants, where they're going, blah, 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 because we have to house them under the asylum law 1999. It's part written in the law. I Googled it the other day, and it says that they must be held in hotels or likewise accommodation. And until that law's repealed, everybody can sit there and say, we're going to do this to them, do that to them. Apart from stopping them actually touching ground, what can you do? There's nothing we can do.
I mean, Nigel Farage has a big and radical plan. He says he's going to withdraw from all this European legislation. He says he wants a different Bill of Rights. He says he wants to deport people up to 5 flights a day. Do you think that's something that could happen, Paul? Do you think it's actually realistic?
I think we can do anything we want. We just have to have a government that's got the guts to do it. It's like when you said that the Germans are sending people to Afghanistan, and that Paul Richards goes, no, we don't want to do that. You think, why don't you shut the hell up? We want these people out, and we don't want them to come here. And I think with the French, we stop giving them money, take away their fishing licenses en masse. I would rather have a trade war with them, because they're the people that are causing this. And I think our government needs to get in line with the French and the Italians and stop the German asylum boats coming over from North Africa, because apparently the Germans are funding those ships to pick them up.
Well, listen, I think it's interesting actually, just looking at a tweet here of someone, Paul, who says you can't just go doing these things. No, Paul, we can and we will. And actually, quite a number of people really do agree with that. And it is just about political will, Paul, isn't it? It's, especially, you might think you've got a Prime Minister with a huge majority. Maybe he could actually take radical action and solve this if he wanted to. But it seems to me that he's following his party rather than leading it. What do you think, Paul?
I think he's an absolute waste of space. The same as Boris Johnson had a massive majority, and what did he do? He chucked a million migrants through the back door.
Yeah.
What can you do when the government haven't got the guts to do it? Now, if Nigel and Richard Tice say, we're going to take the boats back for a start, fine, okay, I'll back them 100%, but we have to stop these people from touching down in this country.
Yeah.
And we're fighting a judicial system that is just so weak, it's unbelievable.
Paul, thanks for your thoughts. That's Paul in Southampton there. Thank you to Graham in Bedford, who says, you say the job market is really difficult, yet we're letting in nearly 1 million people a year and migrants to fill low-paid jobs. There aren't any. If there aren't any, why are we not restricting migration? Well, Graham, I think the answer is in your question. Miles in Suffolk says, on hearing now that employees are lonely working from home, how long will it be before we have the first legal case of an employee suing an employer because they were allowed the option to work from home? Vaughan in Shropshire says, George Orwell springs to mind when talking about any member of Labour's front bench. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. Great show, says Vaughan. Thank you to Fred as well. He says these illegal immigrants do nothing to help our country. They're a drain, not an asset to our economy. The do-gooders are missing the point that UK taxpayers are 100% funding these wasters. Howard in Suffolk says, can we draw a distinction between work and working from home? Work is driving, building, emptying bins, sitting at home on a computer is not work, says Howard. I think quite a few people would disagree with you, Howard. Gary says, my advice to somebody who sent their CV out 1,200 times without getting a job is retrain for something else, because clearly whatever skills you have are not in demand. You can't always get your dream job. Sometimes you just have to look at making a living. And if you have a passion for something, then pursue that in your spare time, says Gary. James says these young people nowadays wouldn't know lonely if it bit them, what with social media, etc. Well, social media can still make you lonely. You can feel very isolated. Grant in Leicester says if anyone should be prosecuted for the hotel contracts, it's the civil servants who organise them and the government ministers who signed off on those deals. And the final one from Anna in Surrey says, I advertised a basic minimum wage job. The response that I received from Gen Z was sulky, entitled postgrads who wanted me to tell them how I would improve their future if they honoured me with their presence. So this unqualified, hard grafting 50-something offered the job to another 50-something who turned up on time and politely expressed how she would love to take the job and try her best. No qualifications, just enthusiasm. Well, Anna, good for you for employing that person. A couple more voice notes before we speak to Jonathan Gullis. Here's Ian on Angela Rayner.
Morning, Peter. It's Ian from East Grinstead. Talking about Angela Rayner buying another house in Hove. Long ago, and I'm not sure whether this is still the case, lots of MPs used to buy a second home, claim that as their main home, sell it so they didn't pay a capital gains tax, and then change their main residency. Is that still legal? Do they still do that? And if so, maybe that's what Angela Rayner's up to, because we know she's an expert at avoiding capital gains tax.
No, that's not what she's up to. Those rules were changed after the 2010 expenses scandal, so that can't be done anymore, Ian, so don't worry about that. Final voice note from Brian.
Good afternoon, Peter. I just heard your plug for your new book, where you interview Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak and Cameron. I just like to say I'm going to come along. I'm probably going to go to a bookshop and find it, see if I can find it. Do I have to look in the horror section? Cheers, Brian.
Good man, good man. Thank you very much indeed, Brian. You're very welcome. And thanks for your voice note. Jonathan Gullis is here. How are you, sir?
I'm good, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm very well. What's coming up in your programme between 1 and 4?
Well, we've got Matthew Torbett, everyone's favourite lefty here on Talk, joining me in the studio to go through the stories today. 7 in 10, as you've been saying, Peter, think that Keir Starmer's handling migration badly. Is this the albatross hanging around the neck of the Labour Party? And will this ultimately be the downfall of Labour at a future general election? Or can Nigel Farage keep this issue top and centre of everyone's agenda? The Conservative Party following the Liberal Democrats in saying it's time to clamp down on crap music, to quote them, for people who are playing it on their phones. I know it will drive people balmy on the tubes, on the trains, on the buses. And Angela Rayner, of course, with the purchase of a luxury pad down in Hove. Does it reek of hypocrisy? I must say, I'm probably one of them all. Probably a bit like you, Peter. More sympathetic. I see. This
Just
is
got
what
to play
I mean.
some music here. Should I be fined £1,000?
£1,000. Well, it is annoying, isn't it? It is annoying.
It is annoying. It's distracting.
And it's distracting. I suppose it depends on your type of music. Look, I listen to grime and hip hop, which people may not enjoy. That is my genre of music.
You're a hip hop person.
I'm a Eminem, Skepta, Boy Better Know. You know, so
there we are.
I know. I'm sure.
Will the real Jonathan Goss please stand up?
Well, here we go. And then, of course, we'll also be looking at the fact that prison space running out